All right, I'm going to go ahead and call this business meeting of the Board of Education to order. If we would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Two quick things before we start. One, I want to remind everybody of the school norms. I know we've got a lot of teachers here who know them, but parents, I want to remind you of them as well. What we teach our kids to, how we teach our kids to behave. Be here, be safe, be honest, care for self and others, let go and move on. I hope we can hold ourselves to that same standard tonight. The other thing I want to point out is our policy 9324, which is conduct at meetings. So if in the event that a board meeting is interrupted by a person or group of persons who render orderly conduct of the meeting unfeasible and order cannot be restored by removing them, we will have to remove everybody from the meeting and we'll all be watching from Zoom. So we would rather not have that. So I'd remind everyone, this is a public meeting of the Board of Education. We will be taking public comments later in the meeting. And that is your time and opportunity to address the board. Otherwise, please, we've got a lot of business to do tonight, and I would ask that we all behave ourselves and let that happen. All right, with that, we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, it's the consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Ms. Downey, is there a second? Mr. Kelly? All right. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda? All right. Ms. Kowalski? Were you?
Oh, sorry.
You were yes. Okay, great. That passes. Nope. We are, because we are all here in person, we are going to try to do hand votes tonight. So that is passed 7-0. So next up is our public hearing. I will talk about policy 9325 right now. So we get comments first from the GHS student government, the GEA, and then PTA council. Then we'll get to our community comments, and I'll talk about the policy there. So why don't we start with our GHS student government representatives?
Thank you. Good evening, board members. My name is Javi Serra, and I'm the senior class president at GHS. I would like to begin tonight with a sincere thank you to Dr. Jones, Chairman Bernstein, and GHS administrators. Last week, the plexiglass dividers were removed from our beloved student center. The effects were immediate, and our student hub is thriving once again, where students can now engage in fluid conversations, form new friendships, and take advantage of the much needed break from academics that lunch provides. We had shared our concerns about these dividers, and we're grateful that the administration was open to hearing our voices and receptive towards safely making this change in the student center. On this note of positivity, our Red Cross blood drive was extremely successful on October 8th. GHS students and faculty donated 30 pints of blood. There were many interested donors who were ineligible to donate, and our VP of Community Service, Callie Wolf, is optimistic that we'll get even more participation for the next drive in April. Students and staff now know how the process works, and more students will be eligible as they turn 17, the age they can consent to donating, and 16 when they can donate with parental approval. In the spirit of Bleeding Red, our homecoming week will begin Monday, November 8th. The themes for the week are Sleepy Monday, Throwback Tuesday, Western Wednesday, Senior Dress Up Day Thursday, and Red and White Friday. A student survey of over 1,000 students indicated that kids want a homecoming dance. So that Friday, November 12th, there will be a semi-formal dance. With all these exciting events to come, I'm eager to attest that GHS is reinvigorated. Our school community is becoming whole once again, and I'm hopeful that this will only continue. I'd like to thank Mr. Mayo, Dr. Jones, Chairman Bernstein, and all other Board of Education members for their often unappreciated, but nevertheless tireless efforts in providing grant students with the best educational experience. I'd like to emphasize that their hard work is making a huge difference at GHS. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. I will now pass the mic to our student body president, Kwame Boateng.
Is the mic work? Okay, it is. Good evening, board members. My name is Kwame Boateng, and I am the student body president of GHS. In my position, it is often easy to identify prevalent issues amongst the student body and passionately advocate for change. However, in the same way that I will continue to speak for the needs of my peers, I'd also like to consistently recognize and thank the administration for collaborating with students and listening to our concerns. Last week, students were ecstatic to see that the plexiglass dividers were removed from the tables in the Student Center, enabling us to speak clearly and enjoy lunch with our friends. Similar to Javi, I'd like to thank Mr. Mayo, Dr. Jones, and the board for considering our feedback and making changes. As the color of the leaves start to change and the familiar fall breeze returns to our town, increasingly more students are staying indoors on campus. Whether it be during opens or lunch, the Student Center is expectedly being used more. And with that increase comes new concerns and ideas. Over the last year, a committee of students and faculty has been discussing potential ways to reimagine the Student Center, including changes to the layout and furniture. However, the committee is not the only place where these discussions are being held. In clubs, classrooms, and locker rooms, students are talking about ways to improve their space too. There have been recommendations to reestablish grade level sections, improve Cardinal Cafe options, add outlets and more flexible seating, and increase the number of trash cans. As a member of the committee, I'm excited to work with the administration to update the Student Center according to the wishes of the student body. Looking forward, Javi and I understand that there will be midterms this January at GHS, something that we both agree is a great way to demonstrate mastery of a subject, as well as practice taking important cumulative exams. Nonetheless, it is important to note that half of the kids have not taken a midterm in nearly 2 years, while the other half have not taken a high school midterm at all. In light of this, we plan to come up with initiatives that support a seamless transition back to midterms for the whole school. With that being said, thank you for your time tonight. I look forward to seeing you all in a month's time.
Thank you very much. All right, next GEA comments, Lou.
Good evening, board members, cabinet, parents, GEA, and all my GEA friends here today and all that are watching at home. And to our entire school community. I'd like to start off with thank you to Mary Keller and her health service team for all the hard work they have done keeping everyone safe. I know Mary and I have been working hard advocating for a saliva testing site in Fairfield County, but unfortunately we have hit one roadblock after another. I am asking help from our school board and our community members with this cause. There is only one site, and that is in Meriden, and it's 56 miles away, one way for our teachers to travel for a saliva test. Hours are limited and travel is long, causing hardships on some members. Any help with making this happen here in Greenwich would be much appreciated. Board members, you're always asking at these meetings, how can I help when issues arise in our district? Well, we as teachers need your help because I really don't understand how we arrived at this place in time. Last year, we were thanking teachers for our heroic efforts and hard work. Today, we have a small but loud group of individuals and parents who have taken it upon themselves to target one of our distinguished and highly respected educators, even to the extent of following her on private sites and visits. Some teachers have received threatening emails, even called criminals or even worse. How can we allow this to continue? Aren't we all entitled to a safe workplace, free from harassment and intimidation, including teachers? We cannot allow our friends and colleagues to be harassed, bullied, and threatened. This must stop now. Can we send a message to the community that will support each other and not tolerate behavior that goes against what we want to model for our students and children? Care for self and others, be honest, let go and move on? Can we do that? I think we can. Can we oppose these special interest groups and all others who harass our dedicated educators for doing their job, for telling the truth, for shedding light on problems we face, including inequality and inequity? I think we can and should. We must protect the benefits of fact-based learning and diversity in our schools, affirm our commitment to the values of academic integrity and honesty that have been the hallmarks of American educators for decades. GEA is asking the Greenwich Board of Education for your help. Can you please take a stand against these threatening and harassing behaviors against educators? Thank you.
All right, folks, we've got a long meeting, so if we could bring that to a close, thank you. Our next speaker, PTA Council, Mimi Duff.
Good evening. I'm Mimi Duff, President of PTA Council, representing the 15 school PTAs and the families of all of our members. The number and density of the reports being presented tonight speaks to the amount of work being done in the district to improve our children's educational experience. We applaud these efforts and look forward to learning more tonight. And we will continue to ask that materials be distributed earlier to help continue community engagement in the process. We are particularly interested in hearing about the curriculum review, the achievement report, including the specific action items to address lapses that are highlighted, the tech program summary, and the ALT program updates. We appreciate there is so much great work being done within the district between implementation plans, program reviews, etc. We ask that you continue to provide greater transparency and communication. District communications that go to parents via emails can also be posted to the district website and Facebook pages, for instance, for greater visibility. And this will help us at Ptac refer others to those pages. We're excited to learn more tonight in these reports and also hopeful that the board will approve the Old Greenwich Ed specs as presented. We have a lot of specific questions about tonight's reports, and we will be listening closely and gathering those questions to present to the various stakeholders. We will work with the district to get more information following tonight. For future meetings, we look forward to hearing the updates on the Big Ideas math implementation, which began this year. Surely the district can learn from any bumps in the road which may have occurred with the rollout of a new program and apply these lessons to other program reviews within the district. What's going on in Ptac? Our committees continue to work with the district in many areas, including but not limited to academic excellence, ALP, diversity, equity, and inclusion, curriculum enrichment, digital learning, and facilities. Ptac is able to provide meaningful feedback from our school reps and aims to help improve communications, coordinate efforts, and to advocate for our students where necessary. You will hear from a couple of our Ptac reps tonight, in fact. Chairs, excuse me. If you don't know what Ptac is or what we do, please check out our website to learn more or check out our library of resources. We've also been busy working on SMART goals for the year and look forward to sharing them in the future. Earlier this week, we co-hosted a virtual Board of Ed candidate debate with the League of Women Voters Greenwich and the Greenwich Alliance, where we had more than 250 folks dialed in. The debate was recorded and the video can be found at the League of Women Voters Greenwich website. In closing, I'd like to say a special thank you to this Board of Education. I know some of you are ending your terms, but your tireless service has been greatly appreciated. Thank you also to those that are continuing on in their terms and to our superintendent. And finally, thank you to our many teachers and other educators that are on the front lines working with our children daily. We're all in this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so next up is our community comments. Per our posted meeting notice, we're going to take 1 hour of community comments now and then the remainder after the business portion of our meeting. So policy 9325 covers meeting conduct. 3 minutes are allotted to each speaker. We ask that you be respectful. If you want people to respect you, please respect them. What we will do is take people in the order they send up agenda items first and then non-agenda items following the agenda items. Speakers may offer objective criticism of district operations and programs, but we encourage members of the public to address complaints concerning individual district personnel through the proper chain of command. Speakers should address themselves in a civil manner with the due respect and dignity and privacy of others who may be affected by their comments. It's not the board's intent to stifle public comment. Speakers should be aware that if their statements violate the rights of others under the law of defamation or invasion of privacy, the speaker may be held legally responsible. Speakers unsure of the legal ramifications of what they are about to say are urged to first consult with their legal advisor. Look, we want to hear the comments. You want to give us the comments. If you are not respectful, if we have disruption, we'll have to ask people to leave. We do not want to do that. So I would ask again that you please be respectful during this portion of the meeting so that we can fit in as many speakers as possible during this first hour. So the first speaker is Katie Yu.
Good evening. I'd like to start my comments this evening by once again welcoming our district's new coordinators, and I look forward to the presentation of the ALP report this evening in concert with our ALP facilitator, Bonnie O'Regan. It was with excitement that I anticipated the start of our new school year. However, the idea of a forward-facing curriculum highlighted in past presentations was quickly overshadowed by an apparent lack of transparency and communication when many parents learned at open house of surprising changes made and implemented in our ALP program. It is in the spirit of collaboration that I would like to pose the following questions. In what Board of Ed meeting was a vote taken to approve the changes in the middle school advanced science program? This represents a curriculum change and is subject to the board's approval. And why was the placement letter that parents received exactly the same as letters in the past? Shouldn't parents have instead been provided with a letter explaining how this new program would work? When were elementary ALP teachers informed of the change to include social studies into ALP English? Were teachers provided with adequate time to train for this change? Are well-loved programs such as the 5th grade Shakespeare play and the Secret Garden on the chopping block? And if so, why? The report shows a sharp decrease in 2E students in ALP. Why? Is this a problem of simply not identifying ALP place students as 2E learners, or are 2E learners not being recognized appropriately? With regard to the programmatic changes, factors such as larger classes, slower pacing, fewer natural breaks, and more independent study skills needed by students are all extra challenges for our 2E community. The report also refers to a seat quota of 50 students per middle school in ALP. This has never been my understanding of the program, and to my knowledge, our district has never had a defined limit for qualifying students. Our district is fortunate to have a well-regarded and nationally recognized specialist in gifted education. While a distinct focus on curricular writing per area certainly has merit, it is equally as important that our district leverages and considers this expertise as it points to the philosophy of gifted education and how advanced learners actually learn. As our board looks to some eye-opening achievement results this evening, it is perhaps even more pressing to ensure that the needs of our advanced learners are being met. These recent issues point to a lack of planning across affected areas, communication, and transparency.
30 seconds.
Thank you. And in my opinion, necessitate a more coordinated approach and communication campaign moving forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Shelley Shaw and Irina Ingilova. Mike, I think Irina is on Zoom. Irina, if you could unmute yourself, you should be able to speak.
Can you hear me right now? I think so.
You're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening to the members of the Board of Education, administrators, parents, and everyone else present. My name is Irina Angilova, and together with Shelley Shah, we are co-chairs of the ALP Committee of Ptac. We are addressing the BOE tonight as ALP Ptac co-chairs. The Advanced Learning Program in Greenwich has tangibly benefited its students since its inception. ALP has earned national recognition and is at the forefront of enhanced educational opportunities. Throughout the years, Ptac has had a valuable working relationship with Bonnie O'Regan and is looking forward to continue that with her and the new ALP leadership team of Mark D'Amico, Tara Fogel, Mike Reed, and BJ Marcus. We appreciate the ALP program and are focused on preserving its excellence. There have been changes to the ALP program over the years, and in the last academic year of 2020-2022, and the current academic years of 2021-2022, there have been COVID-related changes. Given the recent changes, we have reached out to many parents in the community and collected their feedback. We have forwarded the parent feedback to the new ALP team email address. Parents' concerns center on transparency and communication around the following topics. Number one, what is the ALP curriculum in elementary and middle school, and how are we ensuring its excellence? Number two, what is the ALP qualification and selection process at the elementary level, and what is the middle school advanced studies placement process? Number three, what is the mission of the ALP program, and what is the charge by the BOE to the ALP program? Who is the program for? Number four, what is the organizational chart of the ALP administrative team, and what is the makeup of the building advisory committees? How is the program staffed across different schools? What is the guidance of ALP class sizes? Number five, how are we ensuring fidelity, diversity, and equity in ALP? We have already begun the year with great conversations between our committees and the ALP team, and look forward to continuing to work together to identify and help clarify parent questions and concerns around these topics. Already, we're encouraged by the ALP informative newsletter that came out this week and that addressed many parent questions. We'll continue to advocate for transparency and communication that will keep parents informed and engaged in the ALP program.
Time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Jackie Homan. We're not calling on somebody that doesn't have their name up, so we're going to move on. Sorry, we're not seeing her name. We need to see her name so that we can recognize her. All right, we're going to move on. If she shows up, we will try to call her later. The next speaker is Keith Steinberg. Michael, do we have a Keith Steinberg online?
I'm not
We have
seeing
him.
one.
He's coming around. Got him here. Thank you. Just so we can speed this along, after Keith is Alicia Borrelli.
Good evening. My name is Keith Steinberg. I've lived in this town for over 25 years. When I started a family, I chose to move my wife and kids out of Eastern Connecticut and back to Greenwich because this is where I want my children to grow up. My son has had an incredibly positive experience at North Mianis School, and we are so grateful to the teachers, administrations, and support staff who give him everything he needs every single day. I listened to the BOE debate the other night and heard the Greenwich Patriots group being singled out by the moderator. In fact, it seemed there were many incorrect statements made about the Greenwich Patriots all over social media, posted by groups who claim to support our schools. To clarify, to my knowledge, Greenwich Patriots are not anti-vax. They are against mandating an experimental COVID vaccine. If you choose to get this shot and have your children vaccinated, that is your choice, but it should be just that, a choice. People have had severe adverse reactions and even died from the vaccine. Others have not. How do you know which group you will fall into? The vaccine pushers have become a cult that censor any information that doesn't fit their narrative. This should concern all of us. Greenwich Patriots are a group of people who care about and support each other. They support medical freedom and a parent's right to decide what is best for their children, including medical choices like masks and curriculum content. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Michael, I think I see Jackie Homan now. So Jackie, if you could raise your hand, that'll help. All right, Jackie, if you unmute, you should be okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Earlier this week, my son was forced to wear a school-supplied face mask sourced from a Chinese company that had been plagued with counterfeits. The mask smelled foul, and it gave my son a headache, and it was probably contaminated with chemicals from what I could tell. The irony, of course, is my son has a mask exemption due to a medical condition. He absolutely should not be wearing a mask, but he wears it because you've created such a toxic, hostile environment in the school that he'd rather sacrifice his health than get chased down the hallway and hauled into another disciplinary meeting with your brown shirts. The bullying about masks is relentless and reinforced with disgusting bulletin boards full of propaganda and misinformation designed to brainwash the students. You need to stop the indoctrination into the false belief that masks do anything other than serve as a reminder that our children lost their voices and lost their right to breathe. You are all smart enough to know that a little piece of cloth does not stop an airborne virus, but you've chosen to turn a blind eye to the science on masks. You know this is not about science and it's just about control. And if you haven't figured that out by now, I feel really sorry for you. Just to be clear, you've usurped my parental rights and you are now personally responsible for indoctrinating my son into your delusional anti-science views on masks. The fear you've created for my son to exercise his right to breathe without getting bullied by teachers and staff is simply unacceptable. But you haven't stopped the bullying at masks. You've generated so much fear that parents rush to get their children shot despite the known and unknown risks from this experimental, still unapproved gene therapy. Like the risk of myocarditis, which has affected so many people, teenage boys in particular, that a warning label was added to the package label. In fact, the shot has been suspended in several other countries over the myocarditis risk. Yet you fail to mention these risks in your weekly emails as you continue to act as a surrogate sales representative for Pfizer. You've coerced our amazing teachers, staff, and administrators to take an unapproved shot just in order to keep their jobs. Sadly, some have already experienced adverse effects from the jab, and they felt compelled to take it because of you. And now they're worried about getting a second dose. But your threats of unemployment have scared most into submission. What a terrible position to put somebody into. What kind of monster tells someone who had an adverse reaction to the first shot that they'll lose their job if they don't get a second shot? How could you do that? Have you considered the devastating impact your mandate has had on the lives
30
of
seconds.
our teachers, our staff, and our administrators? You're destroying their lives, but more practically speaking, you seem to have no concept of the legal repercussions of your mandate either. How much longer before the district gets slapped with a lawsuit? And now the threat of a vaccine mandate looms for our children aged 5 and up. We know you'll promote whatever mandate is pushed by the state since you accepted the tainter ESSER funding from the Biden administration. But you need to know parents will fight any mandate and we will win because God is on our side. God bless America.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, we need to move on. Otherwise, people won't get a chance to speak. The next speaker is Alicia Borrelli, followed by Peter Schwarzenstein.
Hello, members of the board and everyone that came out tonight. My name is Alicia Borrelli. I'm a Greenwich resident. I have 3 children. One child is a product of the public schools here. Another child is a sophomore in the high school, and then I have a daughter that's in private school. Is the board still denying that CRT and SEL are part of the curriculum? Because we know it's still a part of the curriculum. Even as I speak tonight, there's a teacher in the high school that teaches civics that pressures students to pick a Democratic position over a Republican position in the classroom, shames students for things they had nothing to do with, asks other students to find righteousness in victimhood. This has got to stop. This is your job. SRT, CRT, and SEL are very much a part of the Greenwich curriculum, and it's your jobs to root it out and find it. Instead of denying it, it's time to rectify it. Sorry. We are in our
Please pull
3rd
your
school
mask
year
up,
of
ma'am.
having our children degraded and demoralized by forcing them to cover their faces. They have lost years of natural immunity programming that the future of their physical health depended upon. They have spent years breathing in dirty air, carbon exhaust, and microparticles from absolutely questionable mask materials. They have lost learning. They have lost a childhood of smiles. These are the years of their childhood. They are never getting it back. Have mercy on them already. Wear a mask if you'd like,
Pull your
but
mask up,
please
ma'am.
unmask our children.
Please pull your mask up. Thank you.
This is how our kids feel. Prepare to take a position as a district against a vax mandate the state declares such. A vax mandate will not happen here. The Greenwich Public School community will not comply. Whether you all realize it or not, the resistance will be seismic. People will move, people will fight. Complying with the state vax mandate would be a catastrophic injustice, if not a crime against humanity. I beg any of you listening to me to do the right thing at this point. Please stand with your community. The most basic needs of our children are not being met. Being valued, feeling accepted, and being protected. And I don't mean from a virus that wholly doesn't affect them, but from the restrictions that are oppressing them. As an educator, I
30
agree.
seconds.
As an educator, I agree parents should have limited control of a curriculum and schooling. I know it takes a ton of time and resources to plan and execute. I understand it can't and shouldn't be altered every time a parent has an opinion. This is not that, and you all know it. The masks have to come off. A child vax mandate will never be tolerated here, and there needs to be a thorough investigation into CRT and SEL curriculum and any educator that disseminates such. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, so the next speaker is Peter Schwartzstein, followed by Cara Philbin.
Hi, good evening. My name is Pete Schwartzstein. I have two kids in elementary school and public schools here, and one kid who's 4. He's going to be in kindergarten next year. And I just wanted to talk about my family's experience with the advanced learning program with ALP. Our experience has been really positive. We've been amazed at how much the ALP teachers at our kids' school have really come up with creative and engaging ways to challenge the students. And I was at dinner tonight talking to my daughter, and I just said, I'm going to say a few words about ALP tonight at this meeting. Can you just tell me a couple of things that I should share? And she said, ALP is a challenge. It makes my brain work harder. And I thought that was a pretty good summary and kind of amazing because it was just a couple of years ago. My wife and I really were struggling to get my daughter enthusiastic about reading. She was not the kind of kid who came home and was devouring books. She would never talk about books that she was reading. And if you fast forward to today, she's not only like loving reading, loving the books that they're teaching in her ALP class, but she's talking to us about it. And she's really showing us that she's understanding the material. And it makes me think back. I spent a couple of years as a teacher in Spanish Harlem in New York, and I was teaching 7th grade language arts. I had students who really came from a wide range of skill sets and levels. And the challenge for teachers is, obviously, you want to differentiate your teaching. You want to reach your students where they are and really be able to meet their needs and bring everyone up to the grade level or beyond grade level. And the hardest part for me as a teacher was seeing those kids who were ready to even take the next step of reading books that were above grade level. I didn't have time or the ability to really focus on them because I had so many students, again, at different levels I was trying to teach. And you think about coming off of COVID quarantine and how many levels, like we're probably at a place where there's more of a broad range of levels of these students than ever before, at least in our lifetimes. So all of this is to say that, as a parent, I'm concerned because a lot of the time it seems like differentiation is done via technology, via the iPads. I personally think the kids spend too much time with technology and iPads and screens. But one of the things we found with our daughter is the ALP teachers really put a priority on pen and paper work, on real books, getting kids to love books, not just love the act of reading.
30 seconds.
So, just to conclude, I know there's going to be a lot of discussion in the future about ALP, and I just want to be one of those parents who doesn't shy away into the shadows. And I want to say, we love this program. We think it's done great work for our kids. We think all kids should be challenged, but we as a community, as a Board of Ed, as Greenwich Public Schools should really be challenging all our students the best we can, preparing them for college and beyond. And I just want to say thank you for the time tonight.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Cara Philbin, followed by Roger Rosendahl.
My 4 children represent a diverse spectrum of learners and ages in the Greenwich Public Schools. 2 are in advanced studies and 1 in special education. 1 is in high school, middle, 2 in elementary. This enables me to have a strong understanding of the successes and failures of our schools. Our town ranks top 5% in resources, yet our English scores have fallen to 19% and our math scores are only 65%. This is the result of an early literacy program that was not science-based and a math program changing every 3 years. More recently, I've heard building leaders and teachers note that they are encountering behavior issues never seen before, and especially an inability to follow instructions and directions. I suspect this is because every year the students are learning less and less from teachers and more from technology. One-on-one human interaction and the ability to teach empathy is being lost. In 2011, our test scores were in the 90th percent. The current 8th grade class, one of the most struggling grades, were the first to receive iPads. They are the case study, and when I hear the younger grades are struggling even more with behavior, what has changed for them is even more screen time. We spend so much money on technology while our buildings are crumbling. Over the past year, I've noted the superintendent's focus is not academics. Just look at how she spent the ESSER federal funding. 2 million academics, 8 million social emotional learning, social workers, ruler training, which will infuse SEL into our core academics, and proposed before and after school healthcare clinics. Our strategic plan was barely 1-page academics and 10+ page plan. More recently, she issued her goals, which did not include one measurable goal, not even to close the achievement gap. Parents are asking for transparency and to be valued members of the community. Yet she continues to implement curriculum, pilot, and change programs without Board of Ed approval or public comment. This lack of governance has just now resulted in a complete and costly failure. Despite an 8-0 vote to leave the advanced learning programs intact, the superintendent infused social responsibility, lenses, biases, and perspectives into the elementary English program and merged the advanced science program and students learning English. If this school district continues to make decisions that are absent transparency, accountability, and community voice, and this district continues to infringe upon parental rights and family values, future enrollment in the Greenwich Public Schools will dramatically decline, and the landscape of education in Greenwich will transform
30
as
seconds.
community members pursue non-public and non-private school opportunities. Recently, I successfully held the current super accountable to ensure all families in GPS have access to their right to an independent education evaluation, an achievement not shared by any current or past BOE member. We need leaders who will listen to the students in the community. That is why I'm running as a write-in candidate, Cara Philbin, for the Board of Ed to continue my advocacy in the official capacity. Vote for 2, Megan Galetta, write-in
Time.
Cara
Time, and
Philbin.
this is not a proper form for campaigning. Thank you. All right, the next speaker is Roger Rosendahl, followed by Jen Benzavengo.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I have to say, looking at that board and watching how much time I have to speak, it's intimidating, and then having that nice lady tell me I've got 30 seconds left. Frankly, I find it kind of chilling my free speech, and I would ask that you may wish to revisit the policy standards for speakers. I recognize you need time constraints and budget, especially for old guys like me who weren't raised online and going to websites. So who am I? My name is Roger Rosendahl, and I've been a 20-year plus resident of Greenwich. And I did, but no longer have children in the public schools. But I was personally a beneficiary of smart, dedicated public school teachers, and I would like to see that benefit passed on to others. I'm an old guy. I personally experienced the Watts riots. I walked through the Martin Luther King riots and Rodney King, and I lived with an African-American family in Galveston, Mississippi when I was monitoring the fairness of their elections. I marched on the Pentagon, the United Nations. I got students released from Occoquan prison. You know, was tear gas. I can't tell you how many times. I was sort of an activist in my youth and mainly on the left. Tonight, however, I represent no political movement. I'm speaking tonight as an American who has experienced an extremely high quality public education and has been here long enough to learn that we have a great country. I'm here as a patriot. What does that mean? Well, a patriot loves America and as such opposes children being taught to hate America, or worse, that they are either victims or oppressors. A patriot accepts a history full of flaws. Slavery was abominable.
30 seconds.
So was genocide. We're not perfect, but we've come a long way. A patriot also loves freedom, including the freedom to make one's own choices for better and for worse. I've had that freedom, made a lot of mistakes. I'm a patriot. I'm not fringe. I believe my thoughts reflect the mainstream of America. Thank you.
Time.
Thank you. All right, the next speaker is Jennifer Benzavengo, followed by Erica Jacoby. Say those names again. Jennifer Benzavengo. Jen, you're online. I think you
Yep.
just need to unmute.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, great. Good evening, Chairman Bernstein, Dr. Jones, members of the board, colleagues, and guests. My name is Jen Benzavengo, and I am the proud principal of Old Greenwich School. I want to begin this evening by thanking you for your support as we navigated uncharted waters over the last 20 months. I have heard from colleagues across the state and country envious of our ability to bring children back to school safely into the building last fall. And while I may remind those same students to keep their masks up over their noses, they can still see our cheeks rise in smiles, feel the love of our teachers, and know we are here for each and every one of them with or without a mask. I am here this evening to ask for your full support of the Old Greenwich School Ed Specs and Feasibility Plan, which you will soon hear is a request for a safe, ADA-compliant building with adequate HVAC and air quality. Our committee's proposal is not for a building with excessive extras or bells and whistles. It is the bare minimum of what we need to provide a safe learning environment for all of our students, teachers, and staff. You've heard me speak before of the portion of our building that sits well below sea level and has flooded sewage into classrooms 3 times since July. I also won't speak tonight of the lack of ADA compliance and the number of times we've personally carried children up and down stairs from the playground to the nurse's office on the 2nd floor, or the accessible entrance of a loading dock door near the dumpster for any child, teacher, parent, or visitor with limited mobility. What I will discuss is our responsibility as a town to maintain our schools. I am the owner of an antique home built in 1780. I know what it takes to maintain a home of a certain vintage, and our school is no different. Its construction began in 1899, and the Sound Beach Public School, as it was aptly named, opened in 1902. As an antique building, its care and maintenance is complex but necessary. This landmark building requires your support to make the investments necessary to safely function as a 21st century school building. Did you know our attics have heat sensors? If the temperature rises over 140 degrees, a fire alarm is signaled and we need to evacuate the building for the attic to be inspected by the fire department. This has happened more than once in my 6-year tenure at Old Greenwich. As you can imagine, heat of this magnitude trapped in an antique attic space, while certainly a fire hazard, also reduces the life of the roof significantly. the same roof that leaked during a storm in September, resulting in falling ceiling tiles in a 5th grade classroom. Although not quite as old as my school, today is my birthday. And as I blew out the candles on my cake just before this meeting,
30
I made
seconds.
one wish. I wished for a fully funded renovation for our school that provides no less than the $24.5 million referenced in the proposal this evening, over $14 million less than what was recommended by the initial master plan in 2018. We've worked hard to present you a proposal that meets ADA compliance, health and safety standards, and appropriate air quality for our students and staff. Please help make that lone birthday wish come true and vote in favor of the necessary renovations for Old Greenwich School. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen, and happy birthday from the board. All right, our next speaker is Erica Jacoby, followed by Carolyn Peterson.
Hello.
Yes, Erica, you're good to go.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Bernstein, Dr. Jones, and members of the Board of Education. First and foremost, I would like to thank you for your efforts in keeping our youngest learners in school over the last year. My name is Erica Jacoby, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Old Greenwich School parent body as this year's PTA president in full support of the Old Greenwich School renovation project. I am the proud parent of 2 Old Greenwich School students, with a future Dolphin joining his sisters in 2 short years. Like many Old Greenwich families, we relocated from New York City before our eldest daughter was set to begin her pre-K year. We chose Old Greenwich, selecting to pay a premium to live on 1/3 of an acre because of the village, walkability, proximity to Todd's Point, and the true sense of community. For us, it was and is an ideal location to begin to establish roots. When we began to tour schools for kindergarten, we quickly realized that Old Greenwich School serves as a cornerstone to the overall community. Despite having inferior facilities in comparison to other school options, our belief in the public school system, as well as the desire to stay true to our initial path of being part of something bigger, of a community, we enrolled our daughter at Old Greenwich. At times, I've questioned my decision, never because of our amazing teachers or even the curriculum, but because of a building that is simply failing. In 2017, when my daughter fell from the monkey bars and injured her ankle, I raced to school. She had been carried upstairs to the nurse's office by a teacher, only for me to carry her back down the crumbling front steps and off to ONS. Last week, I watched a 2nd grade boy hobble up the front steps on crutches with his mother supporting him to ensure he did not fall. This was just the start of a 7-year-old boy's day. I can only imagine how he fared navigating the stairs from his 2nd floor classroom to the ground floor cafeteria, art, and music rooms multiple times in the day. How different these situations could have been in an ADA compliant building. In 2018, my same child, then in 1st grade, came home on a rainy day without her backpack, explaining to me that her classroom had flooded with sewage from the toilets and she was unable to return to retrieve her belongings. 3 years later, and nothing has changed. The wing of our school has flooded with sewage 3 times this year, and this last storm bringing damage to our 3rd floor from a leaking roof. Having our custodial team work through the night is not a long-term solution. It's an inexpensive temporary Band-Aid. Last year, many of our children sat in their classrooms during the coldest months, windows open, winter coats and hats on for the duration of the day. During the warmer months, the air-conditioned units remained in the off position. The situation only highlights the school's continued need for a proper ventilation system to provide our children clean, safe air.
30 seconds.
Our children, teachers, and administration deserve better. On behalf of the parent community, I'm asking you to vote in favor of the plan presented tonight. This plan presents only the minimum investment required to fix the major issues, but by no means is sufficient to truly modernize our 100-year-old building. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Carolyn Peterson, followed by Lindsay Kiernan. Carolyn, if you unmute, you should be able to go.
Hello. Thank you. Hello, my name is Carolyn Peterson, and I am speaking tonight in support of the Old Greenwich School Renovation Expansion Project. I have spoken numerous times in this forum to support this project. While I have done so as a parent at the school, as PTA president of Old Greenwich School, as a realtor and a member of the OGS Feasibility Study Committee, I do so this evening as chair of the Ptac Facilities Committee. This is a newly formed committee this year, which has grown out of the responsibility to advocate on behalf of our school's infrastructure. It must be noted that the budget presented tonight is pared down to $24.5 million, a decrease of 24% from the original master plan. We hope that this represents an effort to listen to the feedback and work as collaborative partners. Old Greenwich School has not had a significant renovation in 25 years, and we need to make sure this one is far-reaching. There are many goals for this project, but I will speak to two of the most important: safety and capacity. Safety. Old Greenwich School was built over 100 years ago. A lot has changed in Old Greenwich since then. When the school was built in 1902, women did not have the right to vote. Civil rights leaders helped our society create and protect opportunities for all. The American with Disabilities Act, written over 30 years ago, is one of those pillars of our civil rights. We cannot ignore the responsibility we have to make Old Greenwich School ADA compliant. We should be approaching this issue with pride that we are finally going to fix this issue. Capacity. Based on the model program for spaces as outlined in the ed specs, Old Greenwich School is currently 22% smaller than suggested. The plan as presented tonight only provides a net gain of 6% more space, leaving a shortfall of 16%. Old Greenwich School has experienced a significant influx of new families in these pandemic years. The school needs the space for this growing population. Thank you again for your support of this Old Greenwich School project. On another note, and while I have the opportunity, I must also make a comment on behalf of North Mianis School's current work. It is imperative that we continue to work with speed and efficiency, returning those students and staff to one building. I encourage all parties involved to keep this in mind while continuing to work expeditiously to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, the next speaker is Lindsay Kiernan, followed by Michael Joseph Mercanti Anthony.
Good evening. My husband and I moved to this area 7 years ago to ensure our children had the best education, felt safe, and were treated with respect. It's not easy or cheap to move to Greenwich, as many of you know, and we work hard to ensure to give them the very best. We love our elementary school, Old Greenwich, so I hope that you guys approve that shortly, but have been incredibly disappointed with some of the decisions made from the Board of Education and Dr. Jones. We're now 19 months into a pandemic, and kids are still forced to wear masks with zero evidence or studies that masks work. When this was brought up in the beginning of the school year, the head nurse yielded to the CDC, but didn't provide any detail. If you actually look at the CDC website, the large-scale study that was done proved that distancing, hybrid models, classroom barriers, and most notably requiring masks were all found to not have a statistically significant benefit. Therefore, none of these measures are effective. Yet here we are, a month and a half into school, requiring our kindergartners, who are trying to learn how to read, to mask up for 7 hours a day. I don't think it's unfair to ask the board to provide the actual evidence that masking works. No more yielding to the CDC. Please provide the studies to the parents who can examine them and decide for themselves if their children should or should not be in masks. Of course, if you agreed to take funds from the government in exchange for following their guidelines, that is a whole other issue that the community needs to be aware of, as masking our children for an exchange of money is incredibly unethical. Speaking of choice, we're all aware that the vaccine will be approved quickly for children ages 5 to 11. I couldn't believe it when I heard the vaccine was being given at schools in Greenwich for kids 12 through 17 with a parental slip in hand. This is something that should be done with a parent present. Although my children will not be receiving the vaccine, I would ask that you not set these up in elementary schools during the school week. It's not fair to our children, who are as young as 5, seeing their peers getting a vaccine. This is a private decision that should be made by parents, especially with a 0.0001 chance that the kids are actually getting sick. Let me add, a lot of kids that have already had COVID, whether they know it or not, have antibodies that have been proven to be better than the vaccine. I carried all 3 of my children for 10 months, and I don't remember any of you being there to help me carry the weight. So there is no way you have any right to decide if my child gets a vaccine.
30 seconds.
That has been tested for a month. The parents and children of this town deserve better. We want to trust the education that our children receive and have faith that the people making these decisions want the best for our children and their future. Please give the parents back our rights. We deserve to make decisions for our children regarding their health and well-being. Thank you.
All right, so the next speaker is Michael Joseph Mercanti Anthony, followed by, it's listed as Lesko Brandon. It may be the other way around. Oh, please go ahead.
Hi. My name is Mike Mercani Anthony. As many know, I'm a candidate for one of the open seats on the Board of Education this November. I have 23 years of experience in public education as a teacher and administrator and possess a doctorate in education from the University of
Mike, not
Pennsylvania.
an appropriate forum for campaigning. So if you could please.
No
jump to your
problem.
Comments.
I mention all this because I believe firmly that boards of education benefit when you have different perspectives present. It's good to have the voices of lawyers, PTA veterans, and other professionals on the board. I would say it's also essential to have members of education backgrounds as well. Yet regardless of perspective, we all must agree that GPS has no greater asset than its talented teachers. They know too well the challenge before us. Tonight, the board will be looking at last year's sobering and COVID-caused achievement data, which demonstrates significant drops in performance. Several grade levels, particularly in transition years, showed double-digit declines. Moreover, the performance gap of our students in our Title I schools has widened into a bit of a chasm. I caution the board not to look at this as a short-term problem. This is not an issue of remediation, but of acceleration. There's a key difference here. In a remediation program, schools identify a specific gap in learning and go back to fix it. The problem there is that while you're remediating in one area, the student is missing further learning. Imagine a 5th grade student now reading at a 3rd grade level because of COVID. The achievement data suggests that we have a number of students in this issue. If we move the student forward at the same place as before, the student will always be behind. What's more, when that student gets to middle and high school, there is a danger that progress stops as the curriculum shifts away from reading skills and towards the study of literature. It is not hard to see a student in this scenario left permanently behind. I don't mention this to scare anyone, but to stress to the board the importance of ensuring that our COVID response programs are favoring acceleration, not mere remediation. We need to make sure programs are in place to accelerate students' growth in both math and literacy, such that these gaps do not become permanent fixtures of this annual report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next up is Carl Higbee, followed by Kim Fiorello.
Welcome back to the circus. Hey, so I'm glad all the teachers are here because, actually, I recognize a couple of you guys. As when I ran for the RTM, one of the things I did was try to help people in the community. Some of these people have reached out to me and done my best to help them. You know, we got a couple bad apples in there that every once in a while, every group has. I'm glad you're here. I'd like to know what are the—
Carl, could you please address the board? These are comments to the board, not to the audience.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what are the exact threats that everybody's worried about?
Interactive. So, if you
So,
could just
it's not
read your
interactive.
comments. Thank you.
Okay, so it's interesting because here's the thing. If you guys have threats against you, I'm the guy you call. Call me first because I'll stand in front of you. In fact, here's my cell phone number right now.
All right, Carl, could
so-
you please address the
Okay,
board?
so here's my cell phone. If someone threatens a teacher, you call me and I'll be the first person to defend you, okay? But since it's not a give and take and I'm supposed to address the board and you guys don't ever give anything, here's Peter Bernstein's cell phone number because he doesn't answer emails. Here's Tony Jones's cell phone number, okay? Maybe you can call them. Maybe
Carl,
they'll start getting involved.
If you have comments you'd like to make,
I do.
other
I
than
have a
this,
ton of
other than
comments
trying to
I'd
get
like to
clicks,
make.
please move along.
Yeah, I have a ton of comments I make because you don't get back to our emails. So, and also your phone numbers are being passed around right now as well. Maybe you'll listen if we get enough people calling you. I want to know, when are you going to take these masks? You saw the high school kids who came up here. They're so happy to get the barriers down. They're getting their humanity back. When are the masks coming down? All right, they're not answering, so go ahead and call them on that one. Are you going to mandate vaccines for young kids and things like this? I mean, our teachers, they're working their tails off to try to interact with these kids, and they can't. They have no emotional connection through these plastic barriers, through these masks, and now you're forcing them to get tested every week. I mean, this is garbage. This is garbage. We're on what, 600 days of 14 days to flatten the curve? I mean, it's time to get over this stuff, man. I really think that the education is not in your foremost mind. It's control. I just watched 2 high school kids thank you, pleading, begging, thanking that you just took down a bunch of plastic aquarium barriers in between them. Shouldn't come to that. These are kids who are supposed to be running around outside, eating dirt, getting sick sometimes, not getting sick sometimes. You're dehumanizing them. And I'm going to ask you again, get the masks off my kids. They hate them. They come home crying. It doesn't even seem like you guys care because there's been no further movement on this since the
30
last week.
seconds.
So you know what? I'm glad I passed out the cell phone numbers of those two right there. Please give them a call. Let them know how you feel. I don't care if it's 6:30 in the morning while you're having coffee, putting your kids to bed. But you know what? If my kids are distressed over this, you're going to be distressed over this. Let's go, Brandon.
All right, thank you very much. Next speaker is Kim Fiorello, followed by Gail Lordson.
Good evening.
Kim, can you please pull your mask up? Thank you.
Okay, sorry, on the House floor, we speak without our microphones.
Well,
When we're at the
in a
microphones, we speak
school,
without the
you have
mask.
to have your mask up. It's an executive order from the governor, so please pull
All
your
right.
mask up. Thank
That's
you.
fine. I will observe your rules here.
That would be the governor's rule. You can take it up with him, and you know that. Thank you.
I only speak about the rules in the House, and we don't come to the microphone with a mask on.
Well, not
Never-
the House, you're in a school. Thank you.
All right, nevertheless. So I am State Representative Kimberly Fiorello. I represent parts of Greenwich and Stamford. I also serve on the Education Committee in Hartford. And I wanted to take a moment to share with you and also the parents in the audience here. On the Education Committee, we do discuss education policy that impacts all of our towns and parents. And I urge that the vigilance of parents, I think my timer is not going, just FYI. Oh, all right. So the vigilance of parents to understand the bills that are being passed is vital, whether it's an act concerning social emotional learning, inclusion of computer science or financial literacy as part of graduation requirement, which may be good or bad. We do have a model curriculum coming from the state that is it's take it or leave it, but these are often one size fits all ideas. As a legislator, I do see many of these ideas that come across, and they will come down to impact Connecticut, impact Greenwich. As a state representative, I hear from so many parents, and especially on the Stamford side, there's a great level of distress. Stamford schools canceled the AP classes for history, for English literature, for chemistry, and biology this year. And it was just before the kids returned to the schools, and the notifications went directly to the students and not to the parents. There was great frustration and confusion as to why parents were not notified first. Stamford has also canceled midterms and final exams with a note saying they're not sure if they will come back. Lastly, West Hill High School is doing a pilot program for equitable grading. And many parents have reached out to me because they don't understand what equitable grading is. And I think there's definitely a trend of the administrators or
30
professionals
seconds.
in education skipping over explanations to the parents. As a resident of this town, I strongly urge our board to put education first and to resist the urge to go towards agendas that move away from core classical education competencies for K through 12. There's a great push for that coming from Hartford. So I urge the parents to stay vigilant and for the board to also stay vigilant to
Time.
make sure that Greenwich schools
Thank you very
keep
much.
our core classic
Thank you.
competencies.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Our
Thank
next
you.
speaker is Gail Lordson, followed by Clerk O'Gallen.
What was the name? We can't hear you.
It's not easy to hear, though. He's right. Good evening. In June, I spoke against highly political critical race theory in our school curriculum. I was gratified to see at Tuesday's Board of Ed debate that although the Democrats seemed unsure if they support CRT in schools,
Not one of the candidates claimed support of terms such as white oppressor, white fragility, white rage, and white guilt, which are pillars of critical race theory. I was also pleased to hear the incumbent, Kathleen Stowe, disagrees with sexualized curriculum content, claiming that examples which were publicized at previous meetings were in fact one-offs and did not exemplify approved curriculum. And I look forward to seeing the comprehensive policy changes these stated philosophies will bring to Greenwich Public Schools. Although not one of the candidates claimed to support the group called the Greenwich Patriots, it seems to me they actually agree with these curriculum issues, which I just mentioned, which I believe are primary to the Greenwich Patriots mission. Therefore, I want to congratulate Jackie Homan, who, in spite of the slings and arrows of radical antagonistic opposition, has clearly gotten her message across. Republican candidate Michael Joseph Mercanti Anthony has an
I'm
impressive.
sorry, ma'am, we don't do the personal attack thing. So if you have something you'd like to address to the board as opposed to candidates.
Dr. something or other, Dr. Mercanti Anthony has an impressive collection of education degrees and experience. It's
Okay,
easy to
ma'am,
see how he
this
might
is
be
not
considered
appropriate for public comments
a
at the Board of
shoe-in
Ed
for a
meeting.
board position. No, this is absolutely appropriate for public
This is not
consumption.
this is not a
I've
forum
got
for.
a minute 14, and I'm sure the
okay.
Democrat Party appreciates his 18 political donations to Democrat causes in 2020.
This really
I'm
is-
just wondering why he's
Thank you
not
very much
running
for
as
your
a
comments. Can we
Democrat.
turn the microphone off, please? Thank you. This is not appropriate comments for the Board of Education. So if you could please sit down so we can hear from people who are here to address the board on matters before the board. You're talking about a local election. If you're talking about policy, that's fine. You're talking about individuals. Then please stop talking about individuals. Okay, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to stop, please. Want to talk about policies, that's fine.
In favor of covering the vital airways of your children and their own children with bacteria-laden cloth for 8 hours a day. I spoke on this topic at the September Board of Ed meeting. The studies supporting this mandate are weak, lacking in scientific controls, and they are few. On the contrary, there are hundreds of studies which prove the masks do more harm than good. You have the power to say no to this and any government mandate, because a mandate is not a law. So stop hiding behind that excuse. Black's Law Dictionary, 11th edition, says a mandate requires two-party consent. You just have to say no. But I understand this is a business decision. This mask mandate is one of the strings attached to $10 million in ESSER funding. There is really no other reason for it.
Time.
Now, shame on you.
Thank you
Shame
very
on
much.
you.
All right, folks, we've got other speakers. We're coming up against the hour. So the next speaker is Claire Kilgallen, followed by Francis Nobe.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Claire Kilgallen. Good evening to the board, Dr. Jones, and guests. I wanted to just speak on a few topics that are on your agenda tonight. One is the ALP program, and I've had I have 3 children, but they're all different kinds of learners. And they've had the 2 older ones have had a great experience going through ALP. I have to say that. And that's coming from New Lebanon, if that helps anybody. I'm concerned, though, about the change to the 6A science, which is the advanced class, now being a regular class with an optional advanced learning pathway. I'm concerned about where the differentiation is, and really for some students, like my son, who shall remain nameless, this is his only advanced class. He's a different kind of learner from his siblings, and he will never, I won't say he'll never, but he has till now never been in an advanced class. So to have him place into science, which is something he loves, and then have it not happen to be happening is concerning. It's not just concerning for my own child. I think about all the other children who sit in the same boat. Not everybody's an English student, not everybody's a math student. Some kids love different subjects. So I'd appreciate getting some information on that. With regard to the enrollment report, I'm always concerned about it because I know how it gets used against the board in budgetary matters. And I see the decrease, the projected decrease of the 88 students in elementary school. And let's put that into some context. Children are not widgets, but over 11 elementary schools in 6 grades, that would be 77. If you divide that, that's about 1.1 students per class. So it's certainly not going to impact the number of classrooms needed. And we know that the enrollment report is only as good as the assumptions. We don't have statistics on the inflow of New York residents, their birth rates. The assumptions really do impact what we get from an enrollment report. And we know from history that it's only good for a few years at best. And I'm glad that it refers to some development projects, but it only refers to a handful of them. And we
30
know they're coming
seconds.
in fast and furious, just like the 230 units coming into the JC catchment area. And I appreciate your support for the master plan for Old Greenwich. It should absolutely go forward. This investment is overdue and it will improve all of our property values. And just as a good news, you know what? New Lebanon got built. We're already at 313 of our 374 student goal. And that's only since February 2019 with a pandemic thrown into the mix. Thank you to the board. This is probably the last time I've
Time.
seen at a meeting and I appreciate your
Thank you.
service.
All right, thank you. The next speaker is Frances Nobe, followed by Mariah Miklojic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hello, this is Frances Wu Nobe, speaking in my role as mom of 3 GPS students, well and truly working through the first marking period. I recently read an article about praise called The Necessity of Finding More Ways to Praise. The article was published by Edutopia, an education innovation nonprofit founded by filmmaker George Lucas. The article shared new research that echoed previous work, which recommends students hear 6 praise statements every 15 minutes. This new study found that as praise to reprimands increased, on-task behavior of the entire class improved. And for students with emotional and behavioral disorders, the difference between receiving 0 praise and a 1-to-1 ratio of praise to reprimands was a full letter grade, moving from an average D grade to C, and completely avoiding public reprimands and using a more positive, proactive approach had an even more dramatic effect, with these students achieving an average B grade in the classroom. As I reflected on this article for my own kids, I also thought about this BOE meeting and why so many leave public comments disheartened, discouraged, and dismayed. Where's the praise? Where are the glows? For my 3 kids and their fellow 8,590 other students in our district, 900 teachers come to school, taught my kids something new, showed them grace and kudos for their efforts. Administrators, staff, bus drivers, and groundskeepers keep our school running. My fellow speakers, even if your comments are pre-written, I challenge you to add 1 piece of praise to your comments tonight. It may be more effective. We can walk away feeling stronger, more connected, and more engaged with that piece of positive news. I recently had the privilege of hearing General Colin Powell speak live earlier this year before he passed. General Powell said, "Don't just show kindness in passing or to be courteous. Show it in depth, show it with passion, and expect nothing in return. Kindness is not just about being nice, it's about recognizing another human being who deserves care and respect. Care for self and others starts today." Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, that's 1 hour. We will resume our community comments following the business portion of our meeting. We're going to move on to our monthly reports, starting with the superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Bernstein. Just a couple of items tonight. First of all, to student government, I just want to say thank you for the suggestions that you continue to give us. We are listening, and it is very helpful for us as we manage the district. So thank you for that. I had the pleasure today to be at JC for United Nations Parade, which was absolutely outstanding. Great job, JC. I believe they had 67 different flags. It was really representative of the world. And thank you to our ALP team on their newsletter. That's brand new for us. That will be issued every quarter. And I also want to say a special thanks to a team that is working on the Cardinal Stadium opening. And I think it's going to be a great event. I know Joe will probably talk about that later. And last but not least, just as a reminder, for our ESSER funding, we have ESSER 1, ESSER 2, CRF funding. We also have ARP, which is called ESSER 3. Of that, more than $9 million, 20% must be spent on learning loss. That does not mean that we are not spending more than 20% on academics. And I just want to be sure, and there's a really good short video of about 4 minutes if you want to know kind of what the focus is for all of those grants that have been from the federal government. And that's all for me.
All right, thank you. Ms. Downey.
Dr. Jones, sorry. Did we have a quick North Mianis update? Oh, because it was referenced, so.
Sure, I can do that. For North Mianis, everything right now is still on target, moving along. As a matter of fact, I had a wonderful email from Principal Schmidt today because all of the shelving and it's all starting to arrive and looks beautiful. So everything is on schedule. We hope, in early December to start getting that move ready. And we're not quite sure how that will work because we have to tie that into the exact, whether it's going to be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, whether it's going to be 2 grade levels and then a 1 grade level and specials, but all of that in the next coming weeks, we'll know more, but it's going fantastic right now.
Mr. Scher.
Dr. Jones,
Guys,
I don't know which ESSER it is, ESSER 2 or ESSER 3. I'm going to miss the number. The last one we had to send in, submit a plan. I think it was in August. Where's that plan actually published?
Right now, it's sitting with the Connecticut State Department of Education, and we're waiting on approval. Once it's approved and we know what we have put in there, which again, we gathered community input from, and we know that they approved that, then that will get posted and we'll share even more detail about that, but it needs to be approved.
But our submission would be public, right? Where is that?
I don't think the actual application is public because we continue to work with the Connecticut State Department of Education to make edits until it's actually approved. Yeah, it is in the budget committee meeting. Thank you.
A lot of it's on the minutes. It's from the budget committee.
No, I know that part. That's why I was trying to just find out for the public, from our public proceedings. So are you saying, Kathleen, that the full application that was submitted is attached to one of the budget committee minutes?
Not the full application, but basically all the things that we talked about at the meeting that she had received from the community and from our input at the budget committee meetings. It's like sort of all detailed in the minutes,
So
but not the
what,
application itself.
okay, so what we submitted is currently not public is what you're saying? Yeah, okay, that's what I heard. Is that wrong?
No, it's a
what
work
we
in-
submitted is not public.
That's correct. And this is
Okay.
also, remember, we have another 2 years to be spending this grant. So even what we put in now will continue to have edits. After we get through the first year, then we'll be looking at the second year, then we'll be looking at the next year. So.
Yeah, I've just heard people stand up here and make assertions about what's in that plan. Okay, and I don't know whether what they're saying is correct or not. Because people are standing up making statements. Maybe they're correct, maybe they're not. I mean, I can FOIA the document, which weird to have a board member FOIA the document, but okay, I'll FOIA the document because it's a public document and it's not draft, it's been submitted. So, there's no way that document is actually protected. It just seemed to me that is not, I would encourage this board, this is my last meeting effectively. And, I would just encourage, the board needs to be as transparent as possible. Because as I say, I don't know whether what these people are saying is actually true. Is 80% of the grant used on non-educational issues? I can't imagine that's true.
I'm not sure. Oh, at the budget committee? At the budget committee meeting.
Yeah, I'm aware of
No,
what
no,
went
no,
on
no,
in the
but
budget committee
it's
meeting.
referenced the proposed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to tie this
No,
up.
no,
I
I'm
don't want
saying,
to have a
but
debate.
Peter,
The
the
document needs to
specific,
be public.
but the proposed numbers that Dr. Jones gave us was broken down in the budget committee meeting minutes, which are on the website. Which,
I understood that part because I saw the minutes. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I was at the budget committee meeting, being a member of your budget committee. Thank you. Did a nice job in your budget committee.
I'll take Carmel Stadium credit.
Thank you. The one thing that was a little confusing, and I'll be general on my question. We've received a lot of money from the government. We call it ESSER 1, lots of different things, but let's take the category of just any money that's come from the government. Just for clarity's sake, I know the answer to the question, but to Mr. Shear's point about being public on things so everyone knows about it, and please be clear about this. Is any of that money that we received from the government, whether it be federal, local, state, any of the government, is any of that money tied to us having the kids wear masks or vaccines?
Absolutely not. None of it. As a matter of fact, when we started the year and we were under a mask order, we didn't even know what money we were going to have from the federal government. So we were ready to go for interims for PPE and all the things that we've needed. So absolutely not.
So if say for some crazy thing, we decided to break the executive order, the law that requires kids in schools to wear masks, if we broke from that and became rogue and broke the law and said, we're going to stop the mask wearing, would they take any of that money back from us?
Could they take money from us? We were advised by an attorney opinion that certainly that could happen. Obviously, as a school superintendent, I would never encourage us to break the law for risk of losing my superintendent's license.
Well, that makes sense. I wouldn't encourage breaking the law either, but certainly the decision on whether the kids at school wear masks or not is not on the Board of Education at this point. If it ever becomes, I think we've made in our policy that we'll meet immediately after the governor's executive order requiring all students and teachers to wear masks in school and visitors in the schools to wear masks like we're wearing masks right now. Once that's over, then we as a board will meet immediately to make a decision. We will wear that decision at that point. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you for the clarification.
All right, Ms. Downey.
You ready for more reports?
Well, we're actually going to get into reports.
Okay.
Thank you. So now we're ready for our reports of officers, committees, and liaisons. So Ms. Downey, you're
Okay,
eager.
Okay, so we kind of go off topic. Anyway, in terms of the GHS entryway, the committee's been meeting quite frequently to work on things like HVAC and the like. We have a preliminary hearing before Planning and Zoning next week. And the RTM did approve the resolutions at their September meeting for us to go forward with any state reimbursement. The most significant item for the board to be aware of is that after the design and talking to the architects and the planning and zoning and looking at the logistics involved in the project, the committee has shifted the timeline for the project, and it was voted on by the committee about 2 weeks ago the plan would be to break ground in June of 22, basically start staging before school gets out, break ground as soon as possible, the day after school gets out, because that initial phase of construction is going to be the most disruptive to the campus. So best to do that during the summertime, with a goal of having the project completed no later than the February break of 23. So then at least all the mechanicals and the really complicated things get done over the summer, and the administration, Mr. Mayo, and they're working on how that process is going to work when they return to school in fall of 22.
Ms. Hirsch.
Well, I had a quick question for Ms. Downey, but I also have committee reports. How will that affect? I know that we'll also be having construction on the fields in the back over the summer. Will that cause any issues if you're going to break ground for the front?
It should not, but all the professionals are working together on this.
All right, Ms. Hershey said you had 2 reports.
So I'm reporting on CES, as I'm the board liaison for that. They just debuted the Workspace Connecticut, which is a new educational facility owned and operated both by CES and EdAdvance, 2 of the 6 regional educational services. And it was formed to provide students and educators throughout Western Connecticut with a unique setting to enhance learning and create educational opportunities. It's officially opened, and hopefully soon that some of our staff will have the opportunity to go there for training and other things over the year. I am also stepped on to Ptac, which recently held its first meeting of the year, where they reviewed the year's calendar, shared some important dates, and discussed this year's communications and school presentation plan. And I will share more information on those dates and deadlines once they are officially confirmed. And the third committee I can speak on is CAC, the Curriculum Advisory Committee, which met earlier this week in 2 separate sessions. Both sessions focused on grades 6 through 8, with the first session focused on ELA and the second on social studies. The committee is focused on supporting continuous school improvement and ensuring the district curriculum meets state and national standards and aligns with our Greenwich vision of the graduate. They're working on vertical and horizontal curriculum alignment of scope and sequence, creating lesson plans, vetting materials, and more. More information about this committee and the work being done can be found in the curriculum management plan, which the board will be discussing later this evening. Thank you.
Dr. Francis.
For the Alliance, I don't know if I'm on mic. Yeah. Just a little reminder that we've got Turkey Trot coming up, which is a really fun event. Turkey Trot coming up, fun event. I encourage people to do that. And I will tie a little praise into this, which is reaching out grants. I encourage all of our wonderful teachers to share their innovative ideas and come up with new things that they would like support in carrying out in our schools and apply for reaching out grants. It's been a really amazing thing that our Alliance has provided for our schools. And our teachers are really at the center of that. And so I encourage teachers to look at and take ideas that they have and bring those to the Greenwich Alliance.
All right, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Hey, good news. Cardinal Stadium grand opening October 30th. It'll be a football game against New Canaan. Everyone is extremely excited about this. We have the pep band reestablishing itself. We have dancers. We have the cheerleaders are excited about it. The players, we have alumni, we have groups that are gathering and meeting for this. It's just, it's spreading like wildfire that everyone's getting contagiously excited about this event. We hope everyone could come to this thing. We had a sneak preview on October 2nd. We were able to open the stadium, just the bleachers, and we had a great experience. We were at the game, most of the board members, and we all just had a tremendous time. I believe, whether it's true or not, I'm not sure, but some of the football players did tell me in private that they were able to sneak past Fairfield Prep only because they were playing in their home stadium in Cardinal Stadium. It was a very close game. So we have the same opportunity against New Canaan if we can get there and cheer our team on. Our facilities manager, Dan Watson, is doing a fabulous job. We got to have a shout out to Randy Fida for working real hard on this project. He's the site manager. He's down there every day, knee deep in mud. He's got, whenever I go see him, he's brushing dust off himself. He's there every day for 10, 12 hours a day. So these guys are really working hard to get this thing open. It's going to be very exciting, and I hope everyone can attend.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Stowe.
I know. How do you follow Joe on Cardinal Stadium? And then I'm talking about money, like anyone cares. Okay, so budget committee. We've talked a lot about the American Rescue Plan and all that, but now we have to talk about the immediate budget coming up. Obviously, the next meeting, which is the last meeting for some of my colleagues, we will be having the budget presented to us, and the budget committee has been meeting and just hearing about some of the high-level drivers of the budget. But then I understand you guys got together last Sunday and started to really pull it together. So we are going to be meeting and hopefully seeing a preview on it next Tuesday, October 26th. And then we'll see it a week later as a board. So I just wanted to give you that update. Thanks.
All right, very good. We will then move on to our discussion items, of which there are many. Just reminding members, we have a long agenda ahead of us. All right, the first item is the official enrollment report. So Dr. Carabillo, I see you're ready to go.
Yes, I am. So good evening, Mr. Bernstein, Dr. Jones, Board of Ed members, colleagues, and community members. In your packets, you have a copy of the October 1st, 2021 official enrollment update. The highlights of the report are as follows. Our total enrollment pre-K to 12 plus was 8,636 on October 1st, 2021. This is a decrease of 182 students from the school year of 2021. The percentage of students with high needs factors decreased to 27.8% from 31.3%. We believe this is due largely because of a lag in certification of students who are qualifying for free and reduced lunch services. In order to address this lag for free and reduced lunch certification, we have sent all schools a sheet with the families that are directly certified from the state and the names of families that are required to complete a new application for certification. The schools are contacting those families, and their goal is to increase the completed applications, which will help with our percentage of those students who receive free and/or reduced lunch. We continue to see an increase in students qualifying for special education services, and that increase is consistent with the statewide trends. We've been aware that the media states that many people left New York and moved to the suburbs. Well, Greenwich has not seen a really big impact yet. There have been some small increases at OG and Parkway with their kindergarten enrollments, but nothing yet of real significance. What is interesting, however, is that we usually have some withdrawals from grade 9 to 10, and then a customary offset was with new incoming 10th graders. Unfortunately, that did not happen this year, but we will continue to monitor that to see if it is a pattern. Homeschooling increased last year. However, 22 students from the 41 homeschooled students have returned to Greenwich Public Schools this year. We have increased the percentage of students who qualify for English language learner services to 4.4% this year from 4% last year. Our English language learner population has remained steady over the past 5 years between 4 and 5%. We do differ from the state's rate. The state's rate has been climbing over the past 5 years from 6.8% to 8.4% of the students in the district. Our high needs students combined free and reduced lunch qualified, special education or English language status as of October 1st, 2021 is 2,393 students or 27.8% of our students. We expect this number to increase some when family income is certified for free and reduced lunch benefits. The forecast for our enrollment in 22-23 is expected to decline. There will be K-8 declines in classes, offset by the increases that will now occur at Greenwich High School. Over the next 10 years, it appears there will be a gradual decline in enrollment because of declining births, which is consistent with national trends. As you can see in the charts on page 10 of the report, births in Greenwich have declined. We are waiting for the birth data for 2018 and 19 from the state of Connecticut to better predict our future kindergarten enrollment. The retention of students, those who come in or out of our Greenwich Public Schools after kindergarten, help to determine our forecast. Our forecast assumes the retention rates will stay the same. Migration is either in or out. Resident students moving in or out of private school or homeschool, and the movement of students that are in and out of Greenwich, who move into Greenwich and out of Greenwich. On page 12, you can view the 10-year percentage of migration. Approximately 25% of our Greenwich student residents attend private schools in Connecticut. In 2020, 3,135 students from Greenwich attended private schools. 90% of them enrolled in 8 Greenwich private schools. This number has been stable, but we continue to monitor them to see if the trend changes. On pages 13 through 60, you have the report from Dr. Peter Proudo. It's a 10-year projection using the cohort survival methodology. Factors that may impact the 2021 and 22 projections and beyond are the in-town migration from other communities. Recent real estate transactions here in Greenwich were 50% higher than in recent history, so that may have an impact. There are several multifamily developments proposed in Greenwich, and that may have an impact. Our retention rates fall above or below historical patterns. Maybe we'll have more move in and fewer move out. Birth rates fall above or below historical patterns. We don't know about the COVID-19 pandemic. It may continue, it may change, that will have an impact. And we are still waiting for birth data from the state. And that concludes the enrollment report summary. Any questions?
All right, board members, Ms. Hirsch.
Thank you for that report. I was just wondering, I know if you look at the figures from October of 2020, report of the number of graduating seniors last year as compared to the number of incoming kindergartners this year, that's 109 students down. So the total drop of 182 doesn't seem exactly that drastic, except when you look at the downshift, as you mentioned, to GHS in grades 10 and 11. I know we usually expect some change in enrollment, but are we looking into why there was such a large migration? I know when we got the preliminary report, I'd asked if we looked at transfer requests to see if we could determine where these students had gone. And it was noted that you would be looking for that data. So I was just wondering what you might have found.
We have not completed that yet, Karen, but we will.
Okay, so I look forward to seeing that hopefully somewhat soon. Because I know I've asked before, because I think it's important for us to find ways to reach out and figure out why families aren't returning. I also was wondering when we might get the enrollment data for 21 for students that attend the private schools, because that might address that.
All right, I will get that to you as soon as I find out what it is.
Any other discussion? Okay, Ms. Kowalski.
Sure. So with respect to Dr. Calabrillo, with respect to what we're doing to take a look at where students are going, what is our process? What in fact are we doing? And when would we expect that report?
You mean where students are going when they withdraw from Greenwich Public Schools?
Yeah, what's the process? You said you're still evaluating and doing it. So what is the process by which you're evaluating?
So there's a difference between transfer requests going to a different school within town and transfer requests for moving out of town or moving to a private school. So it takes a while to go through that data. At the high school, we've just finished going through a lot of the data for our senior class to see where they are, last year's senior class. So it does take time to go through all that data. We have to look at their CUME files. We have to look at the transfer papers. We have to see where they have gone. If students move out of town and they go to a different school, the school that they go to has to request a transcript from us. So it's more involved than what one would think it is, but it does take time.
So when do we expect it? I know we asked for it at the last meeting, and I would like to put a timeline on when we think we're going to get this, because it is concerning that we are a shrinking school district with costs continuously rising. And I think it's important to understand the trend as to where these students are going and why they're leaving Greenwich Public Schools.
We'll try to have that ready for you at the end of November, and we'll get it to you then.
Mr. Scher.
Anne, thank you for the report. It was more detailed than the snapshot that we got in September. It's great for the board to get this every year. I just wanted to call to attention, and I wanted to be sure I didn't read this report wrong. Over the last 3 years, we've lost 467 kids. So all the ins and outs, kids coming to the district from private schools, coming from New York, families leaving, migrating to some other state. Maybe they go to a private school and they used to go to a public school. Maybe they moved someplace else in Connecticut. We've lost 467 kids. And the projection in that year when this started was we would be flat as far as you can see. So, and now we're on a projection of we're reality down by substantial numbers. And we're projected to continue down. I'm wondering, maybe that's to the question of, I know we have the data. I know it's 467 individual records. Is there some way to put somebody on this? Because this report, it seemed to have, and I appreciate it, a lot of, particularly from Jen Lau, a lot of suppositions about what might be happening. But I didn't see where it says, this is happening. This many new families moved in from New York. I know we have that data. This many families left because their papers needed to be transferred somewhere else for a kid to continue their education. So we have to know how many of those are. I also know that the state of Connecticut Department of Education maintains a database of every student in the state. And they're a source of a lot of data of where people went and so on and so forth. So they would know exactly if someone moved to another jurisdiction, particularly in Connecticut, you would get that immediately. I was wondering if you had anything that was more concrete than how this report was written about educated guesses of where people went.
I don't have anything more concrete for you, but I can certainly explore and see what additional data we can get for you, Mr. Scher.
Well, you don't have to worry about me because I'll be gone by the time you have it around. The thing I would say is, this is, forget how many there are. This would be my advice to the future board and so on and so forth, superintendent. This is a major strategic issue because when you have a flat budget at essentially 160 million, and you lose almost 500 kids, that means the average amount we're spending per kid goes up substantially. I would think everybody would want to hang on to that money, but I would not encourage anybody to run around and say, okay, let's go cut a budget. If you're listening out there in BET and RTM land, but at the same time, if the school system can't explain what's going on, the Board of Education is not going to have any credibility with people who are asking these questions. So I would encourage the board to get way ahead of that issue, not wait for the question. And then with these kinds of suppositions, because with that crowd, this will not cut the mustard. So my advice to all of you is get ahead of this, get real data, figure out what's going on, because it's a major strategic issue.
Thank you.
So Anne, I just want to point out the replacement chart on page 11, where we look at the graduating seniors versus the incoming kindergartners. And I know that chart's elsewhere. Basically, we are replacing classes of 700 students graduating at a time, and it's a lot of diplomas to sign, folks. We sign them with a pen, with classes of 579, 589. If you add up the last 3 years of replacement of graduating senior classes over 700 with what's coming in for kindergarten, that's a difference of 368 students right there. This is a trend that's happening across the state, where enrollment has been declining for a while. We've noted that. In fact, we've had those discussions with the BET over time. But the other side of the coin, where I see we have less students, and that is just something to keep an eye on, is that students with needs, that number continues to grow, and it continues to grow at a much faster rate than the rate of students that are leaving. Our special ed population is already up 1% from last year, and that number is going to continue to climb. And if you remember, we were flat for a very long time and probably for all the wrong reasons. So as we improve our special education identification process, my expectation is that number is going to keep climbing. So we have not added staff at a classroom level for quite some time. I don't know that in my years on the board, we've ever really added, because we've been taking away. We've cut our administration. We continue to find creative ways to do things like the math interventionists, which we've taken positions out of Havemeyer to do. So, I don't expect our budget's going to be asking for money for classroom teachers this year. I doubt you're going to be asking for any staff, because we know the messaging, but it's where the money is being spent that I think is the important story we need to tell, to Mr. Scher's point. Dr. Francis.
Sorry, just more of a little bit of a statement, and I think maybe reiterating things that most of us know, but just to be clear. One, of course, if the numbers keep dropping down at some point, there may be some difficult decisions that need to be made. But I think it's also really important not to be simplistic about these things, that, if you have a 2% drop in your number of students, doesn't mean you automatically have a 2% drop in your number of teachers, because you have to really look at each individual class size and what those numbers are. And as was pointed out earlier by one of the speakers, a one-person change in a classroom is not necessarily going to put you over into being able to change anything in terms of your teachers. So I think it's just important to remember that those are not a one-to-one correlation.
Mr. Kelly. Kathleen.
Thank you, John. I was basically going to say what Gaetan was reiterated there. Also, I guess, Gaetan, you're no longer a practicing obstetrician. Maybe you can give us some insight, but exactly. So she can give us like minute by minute data. But a couple of things. One, I think data typically, especially in this world, is usually only good about 5 years out. So I don't love that we show 10 years, because I think we really only know 5. But also, and I haven't had a chance to study it, but I would love to see this layered against the national average. I know you're saying Connecticut, but birth rates tend to follow the economy. So when I look at this doesn't surprise me, I guess, when I start to do some of the math backwards. But I think it would be good to layer that, just because that might be a bigger, there are certainly things that are impacting Greenwich, and I hope we could outpace the national average. But, sometimes it's just hard to fight the economy. So please put that in next time. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly.
We touched on this briefly in the budget committee meeting. We had a member of the BET there, and they seemed to like the concept of putting together a forward plan of what ifs. If the trend continues, we have to look at doing this. If the trend changes and goes in the other direction, we should do this. So I think instead of reacting to things that happen, I think we should plan far in advance and have a what if. If it goes down continuously, then we have a plan where it hits a certain mark, like a business projection. If you have a production decreasing or increasing, you have approach it the same way, where you have, if things trend back, we don't do anything. If things go higher, we hire more people. If things go down, we maybe reduce costs in some way. So let's get ahead of it and roughly put it together now, and get, as we go along a trend, getting more specific with things, just like we talked about in the budget committee meeting that seemed to go over well with the member of the BET that was there. Thank you.
Ms. Downey.
And while we're talking about budget, so our budget for next year will be based on these projections. Is that correct, Dr. Jones? So whatever, when it's presented to us.
Yes.
Okay, great. And we feel solid about the projections. So I guess the question is our accuracy, how do we feel about that?
I mean, we're still in COVID and we don't know what we don't know. So, having the housing turnover and the way that it has in Greenwich, we haven't seen it yet. Some other localities around us have had a 1 or 2% increase. So we don't know. The birth rate, we're hearing that the birth rate is up, but we don't have any data, but that won't come to us for several years till they're either in preschool at the age of 3 or 5 when they, start kindergarten, 4 and 5. But we don't know what we don't know. So there are always projections. We remind people that.
Ms. Kowalski.
I think someone made the comment that we're seeing across Connecticut trends of decreased numbers within public schools. If we have that data, I'd like to see the comparison as to where we see Greenwich as compared to the other districts, particularly our comparable districts across Connecticut, because I think that would be very telling. So if we have that data, I'd like to see it. The other thing that I'd like to notice, just it's a comment, and I think this dovetails with what Dr. Francis was saying, is the trend for next year is in fact that we'll go down another 100 students. And that obviously shrinks us down to even more of a significant amount. And I think we need to be prepared to, in fact, make some tough decisions along with the lines of what Mr. Kelly said, because we've got room. And in fact, some of our classrooms at the age, I think in Parkway, the 5th grade classroom, they have 2 classrooms there with 13 kids apiece. I'm not sure why those weren't consolidated, because under our policy, that 5th grade class, it should have been 1 class. Actually, it's 12 kids, should have been 1 class. So I don't know why we're not doing that, but that sends them, to me, that sends the message that we need to think very long and hard about what we're going to do with the number of schools that we have and the upkeep it takes to keep all of those schools if in fact we don't have enough children to fill all those seats in those schools.
Mr. Sharon, I'll come next.
I think you're all making my point. You need to figure out what's actually going on, because everything that people have said as suppositions, birth rates locally, so on and so forth, may or may not be in play. I sat on this board long enough ago where we were doing a racial balance plan. Malone and McBroom came in and did a long-range forecast. They did it using their standard methodology, looking at birth rates at Greenwich Hospital. Guess what, folks? How many of you, okay, moved to Greenwich from New York? So they're assuming, which is standard, is that in your local community, you can look at those birth rates. We get lots of people who have kids in New York who are not counted in Greenwich Hospital, and then they arrive in Greenwich to put their kids in school. So suppositions don't help. You need to actually have facts. I think there's a bit of good news in all of this. The good news is if you look up the data, we have the lowest class size, particularly in K-5, in more than 25 years. So that's great. If your kid's in a K-5 classroom in certain schools, it's nirvana from an educational perspective. So, and it's within policy in most of them. I don't know about the one at Parkway. It's within policy. So, by the way, great time to come put your kids in Greenwich K-5 schools, because we have the lowest class size going by a country mile, and ones that we have lowest we've had in decades. So there's a bit of good news in this enrollment report, and something to think about and take advantage of, because it'll certainly be that case for the next 2 to 3 years, until there has to be a more detailed conversation about any adjustments from any continued declines.
Ms. Hirsch, and we're going to move on.
Well, I mean, it is interesting to note that there's a lot of new developments coming up in town. So really don't have an idea of how many people will be moving in with school-aged children, but that leads me to my question. On page 6, there was a note on basically the number of students, families that were, free and reduced lunch. I thought a few years ago, families were automatically entered into the program at the state level. So I'm wondering now why schools are required to certify those families. I know you said that you sent a list of parents that were certified and still those that still needed to. So I'm just wondering why they needs to do that instead. I thought they were automatically entered. And if they're not, and then in that interim, are we doing anything to help the families while they're still waiting to be certified?
There are some families that are automatically certified by the state because of their socioeconomic status, but there are other families that have not reported their status in the past year and a half, because everyone has been receiving free meals. So because of that, many families don't realize that they have to continue to make sure that they have that socioeconomic status updated. It's not that we certify them, the town, we do not certify them. That has to all be certified by the state. So, and they have to have that information, and it's data that is collected not only at the state level, but also at the federal level. So that's why we have our schools really looking at those families that we believe may qualify. There are some families that we know through our social workers or through our guidance counselors or through the administration that they know that those families are struggling. So those are the families that they are reaching out to that have not completed or updated their applications.
Thank you. That explains a lot. And I hope we're also making sure to reach out to them in their native language.
Yes,
So,
we do.
All right, thank you. With that, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the curriculum plan review cycle. So Mr. D'Amico, take it away.
Good evening, Chairman Bernstein and members of the Board of Education. We have submitted for your review a written document outlining the curriculum management plan for the future. I'd like to make a few remarks, and then I will have Mrs. Fogel walk you through the redesign of the graphic. First, I believe we have a responsibility to our educators to provide them with the resources they need to engage in comprehensive planning. As such, this plan targets areas in need of updates. Second, moving forward, we will approach curriculum management with a much more narrow focus to start and complete critical work in a timely and efficient manner. Third, my goal and my team's goal is to operate with complete transparency. The redesign of the former Curriculum Council to a more focused and streamlined Curriculum Advisory Committee allows us to be action-oriented and accountable to the board, the parents, and most importantly, to our educators. Much like the successful rollout of our Big Ideas Math platform, which is currently underway, we will remain steadfast in providing support and being responsive to our educators during curriculum revisions and updates throughout this 5-year cycle. Ms. Fogel?
Thank you, Mr. D'Amico. I'd like to take the opportunity to discuss a brief overview of the 4 phases of our curriculum cycle. On average, this happens every 5 years. While this is cyclical in nature, I'll start for you tonight with phase 1. This is when a program or course curriculum is marked as needing review. After this, the cycle continues to phase 2, where curriculum core materials, such as textbooks or primary resources, are selected or created depending on the course program or content area. This is done in concert with stakeholders through the collaboration of the Curriculum Advisory Committee. Once selected or created, we move on to phase 3, where teachers implement the curriculum, gather feedback, and make refinements as necessary. This is the longest phase of our curriculum cycle. Towards the end of the cycle, nearing 5 years of implementation and refinement, the curriculum will be more formally analyzed and evaluated to determine if it needs to be reviewed for renewal again. As Mr. D'Amico discussed, our curriculum management plan is successful because it is delineated by priority targets for our work each year. I'd like to show you an example on your screens now of the K-8 targets. Here, you can see that we have limited foci in each content area for a given year. This simplified view is outlined in our report for the K-8 level, as well as the 9 through 12 courses at Greenwich High School. Next, I would like to describe the intentional design of the curriculum management grid. This has been printed and disseminated to board members for ease of viewing this evening. Please note that this grid has also been posted to board docs as an appendix for tonight's report. I would like to draw your attention now to the K-8 side of your grid. This has deep yellow priority targets denoted towards the top. Here, you can see that our immediate priorities for 21 through 23 are the middle level ELA and social studies courses. Moving on to 22 through 2025, this work progresses to the lower levels, first at 3.5 and then K2. Overlapping with this work in a similar scope, we move on to science for 2024 through 2025. Again, beginning year 1 at the 3.5 grade band and following downward to the K2 grade band. These are our priority targets for our curriculum management plan over the next 5 years at the K-8 level. Both sides of your physical paper follow the same cycle I described just a moment ago. On the slide in front of you, you can see a large version of the grid's key, which describes the layout in greater details as you view tonight. We have color coded this to show where each curriculum area or Greenwich High School course currently resides within our cycle, as well as a plan for continued monitoring and progress over the next 5 years. With that brief review, myself, Mr. D'Amico, Dr. Carabillo, my fellow program coordinators, as well as our Greenwich High School program administrators are available to answer questions you may have specific to our content areas.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Hirsch.
First of all, I wanted to thank you all for this report. The thought and the work that's gone into it, the work being done in this area as well is already tremendous. I know how hard you guys have really worked on this, and it's really incredible that you've thought through so many things. The continual focus on improving, renewing, and aligning our curriculum will help support and improve the educational outcomes for all of our students, no matter what their interests or areas of need are. And I also wanted to thank you for not just focusing on what some see as the core subjects, but including the arts as well. I know you didn't really go over it, but I think it's important. I know the committee meets only a few times a year, but can you explain that the works that is being done in between and how teacher feedback is happening? And I know you've also discussed, how materials are going to be vetted throughout the year when needed.
Thank you, Ms. Hirsch. I'm happy to take that question. So as I mentioned earlier, we did have a redesign from Curriculum Council to a Curriculum Advisory Committee, a more streamlined approach to making sure that we are transparent in the decisions that we are making, the resources we are using, and vetting. Between each of those meetings, teachers have ongoing access to the materials that we are in draft phase looking at. Teachers can provide comment right on the documents. There's also an anonymous Google form to which they can provide open-ended responses. They also have the ability to email our curriculum writers and our coordinator for ELA Social Studies, Dr. Marcus.
I know you guys are also working on forward-facing documents, both for parents and providing teachers with unit overviews. When will we start to be able to see those? I know you have one for the Big Ideas Math, but will those be rolled out along with the curriculum and when you have 6-8 ELA and social studies coming forward?
Yes, we will. The idea is to go slow, but to be thorough and to make sure that we complete on time with our target of the end of June 2022 for implementation with fidelity in the fall of 2023. That will include building out our curriculum maps completely with lesson resources on a daily basis for our teachers, companion assessments that speak to the standard, the mastery of our standards, and then the forward-facing documents that we will be communicating home to parents so that all along the way, they have a better understanding of what we're teaching in our classrooms.
I know my back is to you, but I'm smiling really big hearing all of that. So I just had 2 specific questions. In reviewing the K-8 areas of focus, I noticed that advanced science wasn't listed as an area of focus. I know that you'll be working on refining the NGSS advanced pathways, and I'm hoping that this is a topic we can discuss in the future based on the board's continued focus on an advanced science curriculum for middle school. And I'm hoping it's something you guys are going to be working on.
Absolutely, Ms. Hirsch. And I would just like to say, I would welcome a deeper conversation with the board on just what the focus is for our advanced learning program in terms of purpose. I think that's a conversation that is overdue. And certainly my team is excited to engage in that conversation with the board coming in next month.
I believe we'll be having that discussion on that report later. And the last question that I have currently
Part 1 tonight.
Is for the high school. When I looked at all the world languages and I see that every single world language you offer noted in the curriculum plan except for ASL. This kind of concerns me as it's the only world language that we offer that, for instance, doesn't offer an honors option. And I'm wondering why ASL has not been included in this curriculum plan cycle.
I will let Adrian Hirsch-Klein answer that question, or Christina Shaw. Adrian or Christina? They may have turned off. What we focused on, they may have turned off. I can get the answer to that question for you, Karen. but I know that there are so many various levels of languages that they were focusing on those that had not been addressed lately, but I will get that answer for you, and I should have that for you tomorrow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, go ahead, starting at the end, Ms. Kowalski. Back down.
So, is Mark still on?
I am.
Okay, hi, Mark.
Hi.
I hope you're feeling better, by the way.
Thank you.
So I just have, you know, the information is very helpful, and I got to be a fly on the wall, as I described myself in the meetings earlier this week with respect to the curriculum committee that is meeting and the work they're doing. So my question is really, when do you expect to bring all of these changes with respect to the curriculum to the board for vote?
So that's a great question. I don't see this work that we're currently engaging in the same vein that we did last year with the math textbook review. What we're doing is we're completing work that was already started. So we're not changing what the standards or what the learning targets are. We're simply filling in the roadmap so that teachers have on a daily basis a plan to which they can start their thoughtfulness when preparing for the students in front of them. Last year, when I took over this position, one of my key tasks was to take apart the K-8 curriculum that currently existed in Schoology and look for areas of vulnerability, look for inconsistencies. Middle school really jumped out to me as the area we needed to focus on first. And although the curriculum maps were in existence and the what we should teach was outlined clearly for teachers, the path to get there was not. I know there's a call out there by the community to have consistency and clarity between grade levels and schools, with the ultimate goal of having all of our kids enter high school with a very similar educational experience, having covered the same material. The work that we are doing this year addresses those needs. But again, I would defer to the superintendent in terms of a formal presentation to the board. Of course, in the spring, we're happy to give you an overview and to share with you our final project. We will have that ready at the end of May, early June. Happy to do that. I'm a little unclear as to whether or not that is something that the board needs to vote on. So I would defer to Dr. Jones on that.
More specifically, what I'm hearing is there's a lot of content and materials that teachers are now, that this committee is looking at to approve for use of purposes of for the education. And I think that is prime target for what this board needs to be voting on. And so I'd ask for the transparency on what those materials are and what is being used to supplement and add in as, you know, as the learning materials.
Yes, if you actually, when you look at the chart, the step and cycle and the color shading, it's at that selection and creation where you see number 2, which is when you think back to last year, how all of the math, everything came to the board for approval. So the first thing they do is a review, and they may review in year 1 and maybe nothing needs to change. Everything's still in place. It's, you know, solid. And are you following where I am? Sorry. Page 5. And it's down on the bottom right corner, teeny tiny. And then if you look at the top under our heading, where it says step and cycle color shading. Okay, and when you look at number 2, that's when it comes to the board. So when we are selection and we're going to select something, or we're creating something that's brand new, it's coming to the board, which it always has in Greenwich. Where we've really, I think, struggled a lot is in the review for renewal step in 1, because we were reviewing almost every core area every summer. So we were really struggling to get anything completed. And Mark, you can add to that, because it was one of his early tasks to go in and really look and see what we had fully completed in our system. And he didn't find very many areas that were completed.
Yeah, that's correct. You know, I think I used the term last year with the board that I found us to be in a position of consistently being inconsistent in terms of the resources that we have available to our teachers outside of the areas where we have a textbook as a primary resource. And that concerns me. I look at when I executed this task last year, I looked at it through several different lenses, but the most important lens was that of a brand new teacher to the Greenwich Public Schools, teaching, for example, 6th grade social studies. There should be a primary resource for all of our teachers, especially our new teachers or teachers switching grade levels. But even for our experienced teachers, we all need to have a common starting point, because later on, should the board request a thorough analysis of why our scores are improving or declining, I'd like to be able to say with certainty whether it's a curricular issue or not. But if we don't have that level of consistency and uniformity across our schools, that would be challenging to do.
So just for clarification's sake, we're in step 1. Review, I can't even read this, for renewal. That's what we're saying?
I'm sorry, which, are you talking about a certain, the chart itself
Yeah,
or?
the step we're in, because I'm just curious, you're saying that the selection and creation piece after that comes, then that comes to us for a vote. So
I do believe once all of our once the work for middle school is completed, where we have literally the daily lesson plans, I think they will come to the board so that you can see the work that has been done. And we will hopefully have teachers here again for you presenting that work and why it's so important.
And when is that expected in the timeline?
Karen, I would anticipate that in late May, early June. And again, I want to go back to what Ms. Hirsch asked, which was how are we giving teachers the opportunity to provide us with feedback? We want to give them as long as possible to review these documents, test drive them in their classrooms in terms of alignment to what they're currently using. So that ongoing feedback loop is considerably important in this process. And so I don't want to accelerate that timeline. I really want to give the teachers an opportunity, because we plan on releasing the materials as they're written in batches. So the teachers, and as you saw in the Curriculum Advisory Committee, received the first batch of lesson plans. Now we're going through an intensive review period and feedback before we send out a second batch of materials for the teachers to review. Again, I'm also trying to be cognizant of the fact that teachers have a lot on their plates and limited time to look at these materials. So we have to be thoughtful about using our Wednesday afternoon professional learning time for these types of professional discussions.
Well, we've got a couple other things. Ms. Downey, you were.
Well, mine doesn't really, mine's kind of jumping around, so I don't know if someone's got something that directly follows up, which because Peter's had his hand up. So if you would like to follow up and I'll come back to me.
We've got other hands down here as well. So Peter, if you can jump in quick and then we'll come back down.
By the way, I just want to say, I'm on the curriculum committee with Karen Hirsch. The work that Mark is doing is great. It's great work. The prior head had a philosophy, an educational philosophy, that in curriculum management, if you go look this up, by the way, do a little Wikipedia reading, board members, of what curriculum is and how it's structured. There's also books in the library at Havemeyer that can do that. Her philosophy was curriculum management should end at the lesson plan, and the lesson plan should be all sorted out by individual teachers. That left the teacher in a situation where they had to develop their own resources, but it also got at the issue of why is every classroom doing something different? So what Mark is doing now, I think is fantastic, because it's going to get at what this board has long said. I want consistency classroom to classroom. That's good. Secondarily, it's going to give teachers support instead of the teacher having to spend all this extra time doing that. So the work that Mark is doing is great. And I would encourage you guys to be as supportive as you can with the work that he's doing with the coordinators. There are two things that, if you haven't been around, you wouldn't know, which I've raised this question in the curriculum committee the other day. Everybody's operating on the assumption, which under our policy is required, oh, by the way, that flows directly from state statute, that these curriculums, particularly lesson plan up, were actually approved by the board. I can tell you, a lot of these were never approved by the board. Okay, and that's a statutory obligation. It's a policy obligation in our board. That's part one. So I would not be encouraging all of you to be in the safe harbor thinking this all got approved prior. And just because I'm new to the job, I assume it was all approved and what I'm implementing is just what was there. That's a bad assumption. Okay, so somebody's going to have to clean that up and the board will have to find a way to clean that up. The second part is that on all of you as board members under statute have a responsibility to approve textbooks and instructional materials. Okay, just go look it up or go talk to the attorney, so on and so forth. You're going to find out that that's what you have to do. So Mark is bringing forward a set of standardized instructional materials. You probably have two steps you got to do. Or first step is you got to approve the curriculum if you so choose to do it, which I would encourage you to just take it as it is because it's what's already out there. And the second thing you need to do is you got to go through the step of approving the instructional materials. The other thing that you guys are not necessarily thinking about is if you've been on the board for a while, there was endless discussion about pilots. Okay, there's a reason you have a pilot. A pilot lets the superintendent and the administrators go out and try something out without full board approval. So as Mark just said, he needs to test in the classroom what is developed actually works with the teachers on the ground. And that's where if you authorize a pilot, he can go do that and he doesn't have to keep coming back to the board for approvals before he puts it in front of a student. And then everybody's cool in terms of all the compliance issues that they have to deal with. So this is a great plan. There's lots of ways the board could support this. There's already policies in place that you can use and deploy to support this and make his work easy and make the work of the coordinators and all the teachers who are working really hard and the outside consultants. You could just do it in a way that's really compliant and it's easy for you to do if you follow those things that are already in place in the board policies, which are tied to state statutes, and it keeps the board out of jail.
All right, Ms. Downey.
I just said, Mark, I know this is like high school related, but looking kind of through the schedule for the high school, it felt a little mishmash. Like, you know, kind of, it was hard to see how the sequencing was of math, English, social, all the different subject content areas at the high school. I don't know if anyone could speak to how that schedule was created in terms of the plan at the high school.
The schedule was created based on the core courses that were offered that the students needed for graduation first, and then the courses in the content area that many students chose to take as their what's the word called, that were not required, but they had to have so many credits in an area, like so many credits in history, so many credits in English, so many credits in wellness, health and wellness. So that's how that was designed. So each content area focused first on their core courses for graduation. And then they added the other courses that could be looked at as they move forward over the curriculum map time.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Francis, and we should move on.
So this is, I think, a little tricky because, as is often the case, I think with ALP, it's hard to know exactly where to place some of these things. And this subject comes up both in this report and in the ALP report. But I was first very excited, as many have spoken to, in terms of our previous meeting where we were learning all about the lessons plans being created, the forward-facing information, the articulation. I mean, all of these things are really fantastic things that we have been asking for a very long time. So I'm very excited about all of that and pleased to see that. Sort of looking at the issue in terms of the advanced science pathways, I'm a little confused in terms of what that means. It sort of doesn't end up under the priority targets or the major focus. And then when you look at this, it looks like those science pathways for advanced have already been completed. But then when you read about it sort of in the ALP outline, it sounds like it's sort of like the advanced science has sort of all gotten mixed into the regular classroom, and that these pathways are not really a full separate curriculum, but more of sort of optional or additional work that's being done outside of that standard curriculum. I was, for full disclosure, quite involved in encouraging the board to vote and support an advanced sixth grade science because we'd had, the interdis in the elementary school, and we'd had 7th and 8th grade advanced science. And despite the fact that many of us felt that the curriculum was certainly not up to par for those things, we still felt like the gap in 6th grade was problematic. So I think the first step was getting that created, and the second step was ongoing push from the board before I was on it, and then once I was on it, to try and get that curriculum up to snuff. And it concerns me a bit, having heard at the prior meeting that the high school standards for NGSS were being used for this course, but then to sort of get the impression that right now what's being done is really not a separate, accelerated and enriched, complete and identifiable curriculum for the middle school advanced science, but really more something that's going with these on-level curriculum with some additional work, which I think is not at all what we expect of our ALP program for any of our programs. And so I'm concerned about trying to understand that, because it looks like these pathways have been created and the goal is for the next few years to implement them. And I'm not sure that's a curriculum that we would want.
All right. With that, I think we will move on. I know there'll be future.
There was sort of a question in that,
all right.
which
Mark,
is,
I don't know if you have a
are those
response.
really pathways, or are those a full curriculum, or what does that represent? And has that been determined? And are we implementing something? And what is it that we're implementing?
We've had a lot of discussion about that. So Mark or Tara, I don't know if you want to take that, but I think what we've discovered is what the Board of Education, when you made that decision in 2014, I think what the Board of Education thought we were doing, because again, this team's brand new, so they're just asking questions and learning, is not what in fact was happening. We have the same curriculum. You would just dig deeper, but when you ask what dig deeper means, you don't get the level that you were looking for when you were talking about in 2014. And I think in the ALP report, they'll probably address that a little bit tonight if you want to wait and move on. And I don't know if that's correct, Tara or Mark, but.
That's correct. We're going to go over it in detail in the ALP report.
Great, thank you. All right, well, we will move on then closer to the ALP report and take on the achievement data report. So Dr. Caravillo, Mr. D'Amico, I'm not sure which one of you is going to kick us off.
So
Dr.
I will kick
Caravillo.
you off, and it is nice to see you again. I haven't left yet. So tonight we're reporting on the achievements of Greenwich Public School students from the school year 2021. As you are all well aware, we're currently in our third school year of the COVID-19 pandemic and have had to pivot on an ongoing basis due to the many challenging and disruptive days, weeks, and months since March of 2020. In spite of all the challenges, we have seen resilience in our students, teachers, and school community to make the best of our learning opportunities. While we are pleased that our overall scores are somewhat similar to the level of performances in past years, we have focused on the areas where our performances have dropped and have identified strategies to mitigate acceleration of learning for our students. Our content specialist will be presenting the data from the state assessments and will share some of the strategies to enable students to accelerate their learning. Next slide, please. The state of Connecticut, State Department of Education of Connecticut, has now shared the data in 3 different categories correlating to the way students learned in 2021. Fully or mostly in-person learning, where more than 75% of their days were in person. Second way, hybrid learning, where only 25 to 75% of the days were in person for students. Third, fully or mostly remote, where less than 25% of their days were in person. You should note that students were able to take the assessments either in school or remotely, regardless of whether they were attending school in person or not. We are going to share with you all of the state data from the last 5 years, although there were no scores for state assessments in 2019-20, with the exception of lost links. But the state has emphasized that these scores should not be combined, nor should we make direct comparisons across schools and districts. Next slide, please. Everyone's initial thoughts are to compare data from past years, but remember what we have been all through in the past 20 months and how this data is fundamentally different. And now I present Mr. Reed to you, and may we have slide 4.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mike Reed. I'm the math coordinator for the district K through 8. And thank you for having me, board members and community. And I'm about to share with you a few slides. The subsequent math data will serve the purposes of showing you our SBA scores over the last 5 SBA assessments. So next slide, please. So this slide illustrates overall SBA math data by grade level and following cohorts of students. While previously noted, there is an expected dip in scores due to COVID-19 related issues. In general, you can see we have positive trends in our SBA performance prior to 2021. We believe that as we return to more normal teaching and learning conditions in conjunction with our new math program, we will see a return to our upward trend in performance. In grades 3 through 5, our students continue to perform well in the areas of operations and algebraic thinking, and numbers and operations in base 10. In grades 6 through 8, our students continue to perform well in the areas of number systems and expressions and equations. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the comparisons between our district Title I and non-Title I schools. The disparity is clear, but not unexpected. I'd like you to understand the following. First, our Title I schools had the highest percentage of students on remote, both all year and day to day. Our numbers mirror the national data, which evidences that the pandemic had a much larger impact on our needier populations. Our focus this past year was rightly placed on SEL. We de-emphasized standardized testing, which is a deviation from our standard procedure. And in general, we were unable to make our usual strong connections with our kids due to masks, lack of opportunities for extra help during lunch or before and after school, loss of other after school activities and social activities such as intramurals and community gatherings. And many of our kids learn and produce for their teachers, not for the grades or their parent satisfaction. So they lost this connection. From my perspective, if anything, this is validation of our teachers' historical work and how amazing it has been. Our kids need our teachers all the time, fully vested in them. Next slide, please. As you can see in this graphic, prior to our 2021 scores, our general trends were positive. We know that being in front of a teacher in person has a dramatic positive effect on student performance. Our Title I schools have been impacted the hardest by COVID, as stated earlier, with regard to teacher-student and teacher-teacher connections. Big Ideas, our new math program, could not have come at a better time, because through this program, we will be focusing on strategies that have the highest impact on student achievement, up to 2 years of learning for 1 year of input based on Dr. John Hattie's meta-analysis. Most specifically, what the program brings for us is teacher clarity. So before starting a new topic, we're making the learning target very clear, and then students will have the opportunity to learn, explore, to connect their experiences back to the success criteria. Classroom discussion, which COVID really hit very hard, which has almost, greater than 2 years of impact for 1 year of instruction. And this is your students being encouraged to talk to each other and solidify their understandings and honing their abilities to reason and construct arguments. So there's great benefit from that. Without going into further detail, other high impact strategies like direct instruction, feedback, and spaced practice are also embedded in this program. So as stated earlier, our Title I schools were impacted most by COVID. And as you can see, the highlight in this data table is grade 3 and the improvement and the minimal loss in grade 7. Grades 4, 5, 6, and 8 saw drops. However, we've identified these areas and are targeting operations and algebraic thinking and numbers and operations in base 10, which tend to be more of a struggle in our Title I schools. Next slide, please. This graph illustrates performance of our non-Title I schools. As you can see, the performance of these students dropped, but not more than 10% in any grade. We feel strongly that our alignment, both horizontally and vertically, with Big Ideas Math will help to regain the performance lost due to COVID. Our focus on mathematical vocabulary will support a better understanding of content, as well as easier navigation for students when they have to answer questions on the SBA. Big Ideas also provides daily spaced practice, which is embedded in the program. You may remember it known as spiral practice, and that gives students the opportunity to practice things that they've learned prior. Next, Stacy will speak to our SBA math and special education. Next slide.
Thank you. Good evening. So while in 2021, we did see a drop in the number of students who met or exceeded the standards as expressed earlier, we do believe that COVID impacted the students' overall test scores. It should be noted that Greenwich special education students still continue to outperform within the state of Connecticut. And with students back in the classroom and receiving special education services, we believe that we'll get the scores back up to the baseline. In addition, I just want to point out that our special education teachers have been participating in the Big Ideas Math program training so that they can support our students in the classroom and really support the learning that's happening. And I'll turn that back to Mike Reed.
Next slide, please. So this is our ELL SBA math data. And if you note here, the total number of ELL students are falling. The EL student population is declining as a result of the pandemic. Some things to note is routine visa services were suspended at the start of the pandemic, and this curbed international families from moving to the US. In addition, some families who have moved away from our school community have told us that they can work anywhere since working remotely has become the new normal for many international and Fortune 500 companies. Still, other families return to their home countries to take care of aging and or sick relatives. Next slide. Now turn it over to Dr. Marcus.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Mr. Reed. My name is Dr. Benjamin Marcus. I'm the interim coordinator of ELA and Social Studies K-8. This slide illustrates overall SBA ELA data by grade level and following cohorts of students. Similar to the SBA math results, there was an expected dip in scores due to COVID-19 related issues. In general, you can see we have positive trends in our SBA performance prior to 2021. We believe that as we return to more normal teaching and learning conditions in conjunction with additional literacy supports, we will see a return to our upward trend in performance. In general, students across all grade bands tested by the SBA show a need for teachers to focus on interpreting and reading for informational texts. Understanding this, additional supports and strategies are being implemented to support students in this literacy area. Furthermore, this year, a number of our schools have received additional literacy staff members to support students and teacher growth. Additionally, in later slides, I will go into greater detail regarding the SBA ELA data for 5th and 6th grade. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the comparisons between our district Title I and non-Title I schools. Like our SBA math data, while the disparity is clear, it is not unexpected. I want to revisit some of the sentiments that Mr. Reed conveyed while discussing the SBA math results. Given the challenges of teaching during the COVID-19 pandemic, our students and teachers have made incredible strides and have experienced many successes given the challenges of last year. Regardless of these challenges, our Title I school scores were on an upward trajectory prior to the pandemic. Considering the major impact that COVID-19 has had on our community, this is a major testament to the hard work and dedication of our teachers. Next slide, please. In describing this upward trend, let's look at the cohort data by year. Overall, the trend in SBA ELA scores was positive. it is safe to say that given the historical trends, that without the COVID-19 pandemic, our Title I cohort SBA ELA scores would have continued to increase, thereby decreasing the achievement gap. The 5th and 6th grade experienced more COVID quarantines and remote instruction than other grades, which had a direct impact on face-to-face instruction. As we know, face-to-face instruction is most impactful on moving student learning outcomes. Moving forward, buildings are working with their staff to support student outcomes. Where possible, the district is investigating augmenting schools with additional supports to increase literacy interventions. Also, building data teams are assisting to identify individual student challenges and the appropriate interventions. Instructionally, there is currently a greater emphasis on the direct alignment of lesson objectives to standards and assessments, thereby ensuring that instructional practices are fully aligned to state standards. Next slide, please. This graph illustrates performance of our non-Title I schools. As we can see, the performance of these schools students dropped, but not more than 10%. Considering the major impact that COVID-19 has had on our community, this is again a major testament to the hard work and dedication of our teachers. I will now turn it back over to Dr. Stacey Heiligen-Thaler for a discussion of our SBA ELA data as it relates to special education.
Next slide, please. So ELA continues to be a strength for our students in special education as compared to our math testing data. And we continue to significantly outperform the Connecticut scores for students with disabilities. While there is a drop, it's very similar. The percentage is similar to years 2016, 17, and 18. Reading skills continue to be an area of focus within the district and within the special education department. We've been working in conjunction with Dr. Marcus in the literacy, as well as additional training for our staff in providing high quality literacy instruction to our students with disabilities. I'd like to turn it to Adrian Hirsch-Klein, who will report on the SBA ELA data as it relates to the English language learner population. Next slide.
Good evening, everyone. Our percentage of English learners in grades 3 through 8 who met or exceeded the achievement standard on the SBA ELA grew or remained steady for the last few years, but then, as you see, decreased by a small number of percentage points in 2021, quite possibly as a result of the pandemic. With that in mind, though, we continue to outperform the state percentages in this area. Nearly a quarter of our elementary Ls and half of our middle school Ls were remote last year, which may have contributed to this drop. In terms of where our program is doing well, even despite the challenges brought on by the pandemic, ESOL specialists worked hard to build relationships with our students so that they can acclimate to their new school environments, help them readjust to a new school year this year, and personalize the learning for them using the strategies and supports that we know as an ESOL program work to help students acquire English, as well as access and understand new content. In terms of next steps, our next steps are to collaborate with our general education ELA colleagues to develop an updated set of reading units that are aligned to the Common Core and KELP standards, which include reading, writing, listening, and speaking objectives that are targeted to our students' English language proficiency levels. We did begin this work this past summer at the elementary level by examining which Common Core and KELP standards are being addressed and which need to be reinforced. I will now turn it back to Mr. D'Amico to discuss next steps. Next slide.
So who doesn't like a good slide with an R coefficient correlation? Given the results that have been shared thus far tonight, we know that there are specific pockets of students who we need to support and skills they need to recover. It's essential. We know these pockets of students through extensive analysis at the school and district levels. We found that the Linkit GPS benchmark gives us significant diagnostic information. As you know, we have transitioned towards that and away from STAR. That said, we wanted to assure you that we are not losing any information in the transition from STAR to Linkit because the correlations for Linkit are very similar to STAR and in some cases higher. Next slide.
Alrighty, and I'll take it from here. As you know, I'm Tara Fogel, the K-8 Science Coordinator. Tonight, I wanted to start with a quick review of the NGSS test itself, since it's so new to our district, only having performed twice thus far. The test assesses students' ability to reason with natural phenomena through the lens of a science and engineering practices. These tests are given to students in grade 5, 8, and 11. The tests span across all disciplines of science, including earth and space, life and physical, as well as touching upon the engineering and design process. While we never know the exact content that will be assessed on these tests, we do understand the platform and the student skills that are required to meet success. Next slide, please. You'll notice here that there has been a limited impact in 2021. We are incredibly fortunate that my predecessor as a coordinator of science was early to bring NGSS practices and instructional best strategies to the GPS teachers well before the NGSS test was first given in 2019. We're proud of the strong outcomes that our students have been able to maintain in science despite some more gaps in ELA and math. I attribute this to one unexpected positive outcome of COVID. While we did have less time for hands-on collaboration in the classroom, in one way, this turned into more time for other skills, specifically increased time teachers had to spend on our digital tools. The NGSS test is heavily focused on the use of graphs, tables, and variables to study novel phenomena. Students historically struggle with this. The STEM coordinator of last year secured student licenses for Explore Learning, which is an online platform called Gizmos. It pushed for continued use of Tuva Labs, which focuses on data literacy. We believe that these tools help students to practice test-like experiences and can attribute to some levels of our success here. As we look at the information gathered from our platforms, we can see that our overall drops in performance are incredibly small. 7% in grade 5, 5% in grade 8, and we stayed the same in grade 11. These are our students who have experienced NGSS instruction the longest. We do see that some of our Title I elementary schools are underperforming, and we know that there was a stronger correlation between reading performance in science, specifically on the grade 5 NGSS assessment. In fact, in initial data analysis, we see a stronger correlation between SBA reading scores and NGS than we do SBA math scores and NGS. This is congruent for both 5th and 8th grade. Title I school performance on the NGSS is similar to some of the underperformances noted in reading at grade level 5, to which my colleague spoke earlier. In addition to their points about student success and teachers working with them in person in classrooms and how critical that is, there are a few additional considerations to be made in science. Critical skills in the use of nonfiction text and exposure opportunities in reading for information occurs largely in grades 4 and 5. Our current grade 6, or here, the tested 5th graders, have had large disturbances to their learning environment during their 4th and 5th grade school years. My professional learning for the 3-5 teachers this year will be to focus on strategies to increase students with their ability to read for information and grapple with more complex nonfiction texts. Next slide. When we look at the NGSS and our special education and English language learner population, we have some strong success here as well. The supports for Spanish speakers and special education students that are embedded into our primary resource materials in science allow teachers to provide access and aid to both of these populations. My predecessor was an incredibly strong advocate for special education and ESOL representation in curriculum creation and adaptation meetings during prior summer curriculum institutes. We're excited to say that in our middle level curriculum, every single unit of instruction has embedded assessments and learning activities with supports for both of these populations. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Miss Adrienne Hirsch-Klein, who will speak more about that population of students.
Hi, everyone, again. So GPS celebrates a history of significantly outperforming the state of Connecticut on the state mandated Lost Links assessment, which is given to our K through 12 English learners each winter. This slide shows the percentage of students scoring proficient or above proficient overall since 2017, which does account for proficiency or above across a combination of performance on 4 subtests, which are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The test consists of those 4 sections. The second part of this slide shows the percentage of students meeting a mastery standard to exit our program. To achieve this standard on the loss links, a student must score proficiency or above on 3 measures: the reading subtest, the writing subtest, and overall. In a typical pre-COVID year, we historically exit approximately a quarter of our students annually. Next slide, please. In addition to the percentage of students who achieve proficient and mastery standard on the loss links, this assessment also looks at the growth rate, or did students meet their individual growth target, which was based on the prior year's proficiency level. The growth rate is the percentage of students with a score last year and this year who met their individual targets in both literacy and the oral subtests. So if, for example, 20 out of 40 students met their growth targets, that means there's a 50% growth rate. The literacy score is an average of a student's reading and writing scores, and the oral score is an average of a student's listening and speaking scores. So this data shows that growth stayed level in both the oral and literacy subtests over the last few years. The other thing important to mention on this slide, the acronym, you'll see an acronym APTA, which stands for average percentage of target achieved. And that speaks to the growth targets that our students strive to meet according to their English language proficiency level. So for all L students with a loss link score last year and this year, so we're talking about students who continue in our program, APTA refers to the average percentage of the growth target achieved by them. The average percentages of the growth targets achieved in the oral and literacy subtests didn't experience wide fluctuations from one year to the next. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Bridget Barry, who will begin speaking and addressing high school standardized test data.
Next
Good
slide,
evening.
please.
Good evening, Bridget Berry here with a few words on the SAT evidence-based reading and writing. That's the Connecticut School Day SAT. As with some of the other scores, last year our SAT scores were down a bit in the evidence-based reading and writing. And here's our plan now that we're back to a near normal schedule. This year, 9th and 10th graders recently took a school-wide PSAT, which we will analyze and target those needing additional support. That support will come through classes and through programs such as the SAT Academy, which will be additional after-school instruction for identified students. 9th and 10th grade English and Social Studies students also recently took sections of a released PSAT as benchmarks, which teachers will analyze and follow up in their PLCs. As part of that follow-up, teachers will use SAT comparable stems and practice questions and continue naturally with close reading work with passages. Also in English classes, students do individualized Khan Academy work for grammar. That's as tested on the SAT writing skills. Just want to note, as Kwame mentioned earlier, students did not have midterms or finals for the last year and a half, and were not in regular practice with stamina demanding tests, such as the SAT. Up next to talk about the SAT math is Mr. Byrne.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Byrne. The Greenwich High School Mathematics Department continues to closely monitor student performance on both the grade 11 SAT day and the final graduating class averages. In addition to ensuring that all classes are aligned to SAT content and skills, the department has adopted benchmark and monitoring practices in each class to work with individual students to increase their performance. Teachers are also working collaboratively in professional learning communities to identify resources and tools to help students achieve on this assessment. Greenwich High School will be identifying students based on PSAT performance to participate in an SAT Academy. Here, students will be given additional instructional time after school in core SAT concepts by a skilled and certified teacher. It's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ralph Mayo, who will talk about graduation rates.
All right, Ralph, I think you're on.
Yes, Peter, but you can't see me. I don't know. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. I got it. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Chairperson Bernstein, Dr. Jones, members of the Board of Education, I do realize that this meeting is going to go very long tonight, but before it ends, I wanted to say one thing to the members of the Board of Education. Thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for all the hard work, and thank you for caring so much about the students that attend the Greenwich Public Schools. And you can tell you care by the questions that you ask and the way you push us to get better. So again, I know some of you won't be here for the next meeting. So thank you for your service, and for the others that will remain, thank you for continued service. It's been a pleasure. Tonight, I'm going to talk about our graduation rates at Greenwich High School. I have with me Judy Liddell, our Director of Counseling, and Ms. Dana Talata, our Vice Principal. As you can see from the chart, our graduation rates have been fairly flat over the last 4 to 5 years. This is not acceptable to us. We are not in alignment with the district we compare ourselves to, and this is something that we are going to work on this year and next year to improve this rate so that we can be proud of that, like we are proud of every other thing we do at Greenwich High School. So our school improvement plan is focused on making these gains for all students. So I'm going to, I think next slide, go on to our AP participation. Our participation continues to grow. We're extremely excited about that. We love to have more students enrolled in AP classes and at the end taking those tests and getting 3s and above. So I think this is a bright spot in our report for tonight, is that our participation rate continues to be at all-time highs. Next slide. And then you can see the AP scores 3, 4, and 5 by department here in art and music, English, math, science, social studies, and world language. And each department chair will be talking about their scores as we move on in the presentation. Next slide, please. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Mrs. Julie Nixon and Mr. Patrick Taylor, who will begin the discussion about our scores in both art and in music. Julie.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So I'm not going to take up a lot of your time, but the art department offers 5 different AP classes. We have 7 teachers, 4 of us teach AP. So we have a very big program for our department. We started to offer AP classes to give our students the opportunity for rigor and to go more in depth in their art, and the scores and submitting their portfolios. We encourage and we support, but I'm going to say to you what we say to our students, which is a test score cannot define their creative level or their thought processes or their ideas. So my AP teachers wanted me to explain that a little bit because art is a very subjective subject. And it sometimes happens that we'll have a student that gets a low score, like a 3 on an AP portfolio, and will win a gold at Scholastic. So it's that kind of a subject, you know, so we're very careful about the scores and how we talk about the scores with our students. I can go into depth if you want for our 2D art and design, AP computer art, and AP drawing. In the year 2020-21, we had 12 students submitting AP portfolios. All 12 scored 3 or higher, 8 scored 3, 2 scored 4, and 2 scored 5. In 2019-2020, 14 students submitted AP portfolios, 13 scored 3 or higher. In AP photography, 2020-21, we had 8 students submitting portfolios, 3 scored 4, 3 of the portfolios scored 4, 4 scored 3, and 1 scored 2. In AP 3D, we have AP ceramics and sculpture as well. We didn't have as many students submit in 2021. It's very difficult to do ceramics during COVID because the clay dries out and we weren't able to fire in time. So that particular program got hit hard by COVID. But in 2019-2020, we still had 5 submitting portfolios. They all received 3s and 4s. We also have an AP art history course, which our AP art history teacher wanted me to explain that she stresses to students that scores do not define them, and it is more important to her that they leave with an open mind and respect across cultures. They, in 2020-2021, 13 students took the exam, 7 students scored 3 or higher, 4 scored 2, 2 scored 3, 1 scored 4, 4 scored 5. In 2019-2020, 11 students took the exam, 8 students scored 3 or higher, 3 scored 2, 4 students scored 3, 1 scored 4, and 3 scored 5. So in AP Art History, they study 250 artworks for a 3-hour exam. And in the studio classes, it's more of an investigation of a particular concept. So the kids are really able to go into depth and have their own idea that they explore throughout the year. So does anyone have any questions about AP art?
We're
We're
going
very
to hold
proud.
the questions until the end. Thank you, Julie.
Okay, so I should stay on.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mr. Taylor.
Good evening, everyone. In music, we just have one AP course. It's in music theory. And for those unfamiliar with the term, music theory refers to the study of music other than performance or music history. So it's essentially the nuts and bolts of how music is composed and how it's analyzed. And so students, it actually starts from scratch, but goes quite quickly into basic composition. And in the AP test, the students are expected obviously to do a bunch of multiple choice type questions on general knowledge in the subject, but also to do an oral AURAL section in which they're listening to melodies played and writing them down. And perhaps in the scariest part of the exam, all the students are expected to see a melody printed in music notation and then sing it after having only been given the starting note. So it's a rigorous course. It actually combines 2 courses that you see in college, both music theory and what's called ear training. And so it's a constant tug of war to allocate time to make sure they're feeling good about their skills in both those areas. Looking at the scores for the last 5 years, they were consistent up till the pandemic. We definitely took a hit. Prior to the pandemic, we enjoyed average scores well above the state average and far above the global average. But we've regressed a bit to the state average, basically almost on the button for the last couple of years through the pandemic. But that was, we had it was very difficult to, especially the oral piece, to be fully remote. as some students were, and to be able to have the daily exercises that we do in the classroom, singing, for example. I couldn't hear them sing in real time, and et cetera. So I don't have any doubt that we'll spring back, but in the short term, it was a little bit rough. Though we've always had students excel. Every year there's students with 5s, but average score of 3 for this past year is not indicative of what normally happens. So hopefully that's a little bit of information for you, and you let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Next, Mr. All right, I just forgot your name. Andrew Byrne, Mr. Byrne, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Ann. My name's Andrew Byrne. I'm here to report out on the advanced placement math scores. The math and computer science department's results continue to be solid. There were a total of 259 exams given in our department last year. We had a total of 151 students sit for the calculus AB and BC exams, with all but 23 earning a 3 or higher. And in addition, we had a total of 55 students, up from 44 the previous year and 27 the year before, sit for one of the 2 computer science exams, with all but 1 earning a 3 or higher. Moving forward, our teachers will continue to collaborate, innovate, and explore opportunities to provide our students with the best preparation for the advanced placement exams. We have returned to pre-pandemic teaching and assessment practices, and we will no longer allow students full access to their calculators and a note sheet during exams. We will continue to explore the use of AP Classroom as a necessary tool and resource for both teachers and students. In addition, the department is quite proud of the growing interest in the computer science department and is hoping that this will be a trend for all our courses in the future. It's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. John DeLuca, who will talk about science.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is John DeLuca. I'll be reporting out on AP Science. We have 5 different AP Science tests that we take and courses that our students take: biology, chemistry, environmental science, physics with calculus, and algebraic physics as well. All of our AP courses were on a positive trajectory prior to 2020, the pandemic. In fact, all but one had achieved 5-year highs in 2019. That one was AP Physics, the algebraic AP Physics, which had achieved 5-year high the year before. So the onset of the pandemic certainly impacted our performance there. We really think the lack of hands-on activities, labs, really compromised the delivery of some of the material. And while we were able to find some excellent online resources, it just certainly wasn't able to replicate what we do in the classroom. The testing practices changed as well. Those were kind of a moving target for us. Now that we have pretty much returned to pre-pandemic instructional practices, the teachers are really thrilled to have the students back, reestablishing our labs, our activities, the classroom instruction as it had been in the past. They're looking forward to continuing to use the revamped AP Classroom that's available to them as well. And we're hopeful that our scores will begin to look again like they did pre-pandemic. It's now my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Lucia Recco.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good evening. I'm Lucia Recco. I'm the Program Administrator for Social Studies. and I'm going to tell you about our AP scores this year. AP participation in social studies remained high in 2021. We continue to have the highest number of AP exams taken of all the programs. Last year, we had 878 exams which were taken. You can see, I believe you've been provided the mean scores for all the subjects. So our various AP subjects include AP US History, AP Psychology, AP European History, AP Micro and Macro Economics, AP US Government and Politics, and AP Comparative Government and Politics. All of our mean scores did take a slight dip from the year before, except for AP Comparative Politics, which was at a 4-year high. All means, however, were significantly higher than the Connecticut mean for this subject, as well as the global mean. I'm going to echo some challenges in preparing students for the AP exams. For instance, it was difficult to replicate the assessments in the hybrid model with what they would experience on the real AP exam. In order to make the AP or rather make the assessment experiences equitable, teachers allowed for open note exams online, which made it, tough to assess a student's true knowledge of the content. And an open note exam didn't necessarily require the same depth of understanding as an exam where you can't use any memory aids. Also, teachers reported that there was lower student engagement in the digital format and difficult to build rapport with students that were fully remote. And some teachers noted that the students who were fully remote had lower scores. Also, which was unique on the AP exams in 2021, was that the students couldn't go back to previous questions, which is contrary to what we tell students to do as well. Go back and check your work or skip a question and come back to it if you're having trouble with it. Also, teachers, tried to adjust to a different AP exam format from the past. For instance, the AP US test did not have a long essay question, which our students usually excel on. It only had a DBQ question. Moving forward, we're happy to report that we've returned to instructional strategies and assessments that were used in 2019 and 20. The AP tests in 2022 will be in the previous format and paper and pencil. So teachers are giving frequent formative assessments without notes, without memory aids, so they can give the students feedback. There's definitely a greater emphasis on writing skills for those short answer and essay portions, and a regular use of practice questions and model essays, so students can see how the scoring is done. I'm now going to introduce Ms. Bridget Berry, who's going to talk about English.
Now, next is Christina Shaw to talk about world languages, I thought.
I think we skipped Bridget.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I won't take it personally. For the AP English Lit and Comp and the language and composition tests, we are proud that the number of students taking the 2 English AP courses continues to grow, as Ralph indicated. Even though last year's scores were a bit lower than in past years, we still had 50% of our students score a 4 or 5 on the most challenging AP Lit and Comp exam. And our Lang and Comp score is up from 3.49 to 371, with more students taking the test. That's from the last real test in 2019, and I'll explain that. A little bit of context on last year's test. You've heard parts of this from the others, and you don't know these unless you're close to the tests. In response to the pandemic, the 2020 tests were digital and comprised of one essay and no multiple choice. The typical test is 3 essays, timed essays, and 55 multiple choice. So it was a real humdinger. The 2021, just last year, they were full tests, but they were digital and taken at home. With that test, when students were consulted about it afterwards, they mentioned frustration, as has been mentioned, with not being able to annotate and not being able to go back to previous questions. Many said they realized an answer to a previous question and answering a later question, but they couldn't go back. In addition, some students struggled with the timed writing as they hadn't been given as much timed writing practice in the remote hybrid learning. Going forward, the 2022 test will not be digital. If, and we can imagine it, College Board runs digital exams in the future, they have promised corrections such as letting students return to a previous question within a section, which would make a difference. And now that we're back on a more normal schedule, teachers will give students more practice with timed and sample tests. Also, again, midterms and finals this year will give students practice with the stamina demanding tests. I'm going to introduce now Ms. Christina Shaw for World Languages.
Good evening, everyone. I will be outlining for the community our World Language AP scores and talk about next steps for our students and our teachers. During the pandemic years of 2020 and 2021, our AP scores in Chinese actually went up in both the number of students taking the exam and the mean score. So we were very pleased with that. For French, our highest mean in the last 5 years was actually in the year 2017. The numbers increased in 2019 and 2020, and we had a mean score of 4. But in 2021, we did see a dip in both scores and in the students enrolled. And still, I would like to point out that the score in French, the mean score was higher than the national mean score. German scores were the highest in 2020 in the last 5 years in both numbers of students taking the exam and the mean score at an incredible 4.5. In 2021, we did have a dip in the amount of students taking it and also had a dip in the mean score. But this mean score was actually higher than in the previous years of 2017 through 2019. In AP Italian, the number of students taking the test did drop in the years 2020 and 2021 after peaking in 2018. However, our mean score was the highest that it had been in the past 4 years at 4.6. Now, our AP Spanish program is our largest, offering 2 different types of AP courses, AP Lang and also AP Spanish Literature. In AP Spanish Language, our numbers have been exceptional, peaking in 2019 with 143 students taking the exam. In the last 5 years, we've never had a mean lower than 4. Our mean stayed steady for 2020 and 2021, despite the pandemic challenges, reaching a mean of 4.15 and over 130 students taking the exam in 2020 and 111 students taking the exam in 2021. For AP Literature, which is quite a difficult course, 2020 did see the lowest amount of students taking the test and a drop in the mean score. But in 2021, because by the end of the year, we did have the students in person, the number of students taking the exam jumped back to its usual numbers. And our mean also was at its usual rate of about 4. Overall, in the World Language Department, we are thrilled with the consistency of our World Language AP scores over the last 5 years. There, of course, have been the expected dips in the last 2 years. To keep our scores moving in the right direction, we have recently purchased and trained our staff in the use of a virtual language lab, as I mentioned at my last presentation to the board. This technology will begin preparing our students earlier in their world language career at our high school for the tests that they're expected to take during the AP exam in speaking. Teachers will also be engaged this year in professional development with ACTFL, which is the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, in the creation and use of benchmarks and rubrics. So thank you so much for your time. I believe that Dr. Carabillo has a few words that she would like to say.
So I get to end our achievement report on a very high note, which I believe is very high. And this is our community results from our survey back in the spring of 2021. For our GPS staff, we had 729 people respond, and over half of them, 56% of them, have positive perceptions of our social and learning climate in their schools. And that's in spite of COVID-19. So I'm extremely happy to hear that. Next slide, please. For our students valuing school, at the elementary level, we had 1,490 students. I'm sorry, I forgot to say, next slide. Next slide, thank you. We had 1,490 students participate in grades 3 through 5, and 2,342 students respond in grades 6 through 12. And this is for the percentage of students who feel that school is interesting and important. And 55% of our students feel that way. That's pretty exciting to think that that was during our COVID, yet they were in school, they felt as though it was positive, and they felt as though they were valued. Next slide, please. Students belonging. Again, it's pretty stable. We're almost where our target was of 62%. We were at 59% of the students said that they definitely feel valued members of their community. Now, as expected, our elementary school students have more positive responses than our secondary students, but we have seen that over the years that we have been doing this survey. And then the last slide, which for me really states and shows that the board and Dr. Jones and the administrators and the teachers have really worked hard at communicating with our parents and developing that home to school connection. We had over 2,643 families respond to this survey. So in last year, in 2021, 89% welcomed parents in children's learning. They thought that we were the partners. We were welcoming the parents as partners. 84% of parents said that they had many opportunities to express their concerns and opinions about their important issues concerning their child. And the one area that wasn't as high as I had hoped it to be was the area of how confident are you in your ability to support your child's learning at home? Well, I think we've put a lot of things in place this year with our forward-facing curriculum that we have for parents, with the information that we have given you at the first board meeting and at this meeting. So we are very happy, but we are still going to continue to work to make sure that parents really feel that they're connected with their teachers and with the school and our partners in learning. That's it for our report, and next up is questions.
All right. Questions from the board. Yes, first, thank you to all of the presenters, a lot of people who have stayed up late to be with us. So we appreciate that. All right, Ms. Hirsch.
I was gonna say, I know that many of us are gonna look at the report and sort of focus on the learning loss that may have occurred during COVID. And I know that's important, but I'm looking back slightly further. I know that we all know that we have an achievement gap, and it's not just here, it's nationally. And if there was a perfect solution for how to fix it, we would have already done so. But we have an incredible opportunity to address this issue in conjunction with combating learning loss that we've experienced by using some of the ESSER funds. And I'm hoping that soon we're going to get a plan on how that's going to be, those funds are going to be used to support learning loss and the achievement gap. But looking at slide 4, I thought it was important to note that I know we don't have data for 2020 as students weren't tested that year. And in 21, they had to focus on what was missed during the second half of the second semester from the year prior, plus learn all of the new grade level material. I kind of assumed that the test didn't take into account that students had most likely not gotten through the same lessons as in the year prior before taking the test.
That would be something I would have to check on, Karen. I'm not sure. I'll have to check with Ajit at the state, and I will find that answer out for you.
Thank you, because I'd assume if it was testing on things that the kids hadn't gotten to because they were still trying to make up for stuff from the year before, that could also account for some of the dip in the scores. So I was just going to say, I mean, overall, the report's showing us trends in test scores, comparing scores per grade year to year. And however, in the past, I think we've also looked at the growth in learning rates, following a grade level score from year to year, to see how that grade's test scores improved over time. And you can sort of extrapolate that information when looking at the bar graphs, but I was wondering why that information was not necessarily included in this report, because I think that would be as equally as important, seeing where, the second graders are as they move forward to the next year. They all have different needs in each grade. So the grade to grade doesn't always give us the information that we need. And I know growth is kind of a big topic. So are we going to be able to get some of that data?
If I might just jump in, we don't have the same level of data that we would normally have from the state. And as a reminder, go back to that very beginning of the slide where they say we're not even really supposed to be comparing. And there are lots of reasons why. We're trying to still look at it, but what I would say is we're going student by student and looking at every individual student's growth and where they are. And that goes back to what they were talking about earlier tonight with Linkit.
Well, I was going to say we don't have the state testing data, but we do have Linkit. I know it was new last year, but Mark, I think, was saying it was comparative to where STAR testing was. I mean, I would just love to be able to see that, because I think that's not from 2020. Yeah. Well, I mean, for some of it, yeah. But that's what I'm saying. I'd like to see the growth. Yeah.
She's not talking about that.
No, I'm talking about something else. And then I guess the last question I had sent this previously, but I was just curious because on page 13, this in-school SAT, it was noted that COVID negatively impacted the class of 2022, their SAT scores, but I wasn't sure if that included the data for the class of 21. That the graduating class last year took the in-school school day SAT in September of 2020, while the class of 2022 took it in March, I believe. So was that data included, or was it just for class of 22?
And I did get the answer. Did you want to answer that, or?
I'll let you answer it.
Yeah, I did reach out when I saw your question today, and it is just the class of 22.
Okay, well then I'd like to see the data also for 21, just out of curiosity. I think that's kind of important for us to be able to see. I know they weren't told that they were going to be taking the in-school SAT or the school day SAT and only had about a week or so preparation, but I think that would be just sort of an interesting data point for us as well.
Dr. Francis.
So I would also like to just emphasize, I think the growth data is important, and while it may not be perfect, to try and find ways to look at that, because I do think that's a piece we've been talking about for years now. And while we've sort of switched from one system to another, and I can't remember, Peter, sure, the one we had before, but then we had said, well, we could do the state system instead. But I think, no, I know that's gone, but I'm just saying we had talked about wanting to continue to look at growth. The other thing that we used to see, I'm starting to sound like you, back in the old days, we used to see was the comparison to similar districts. Not just the state, because I do feel like we are a well-funded district. And while we have diversity, I think it would be useful to look at those numbers as well.
We did have a lot of conversation about including that this year. And again, we worked with the state trying to figure out that because our data is all so different. And in one prime example, we were one of the school districts that was face-to-face from the beginning. So our district was actually one of the districts that was working with the state on how we were going to count for attendance for kids who were full remote and kids who were in person, and then the kids that would jump back and forth. And so the way we were calculating early on, we already had our system set before the state actually put it out. So if you're comparing to other districts, it depends which category they're in and how they were counted. And in the end, it was too confusing. And we were advised not to use it. But I agree, going forward, it's a great, that's a great thing for us to do.
All right, anything else, Ms. Downey?
I just want to come back to like the achievement gap issue and talking a little bit about our funds. Since we have the American Rescue Plan funds, I'd love, it's early in the school year. And because we talked about a percentage of it has to be used for learning loss. And I know there are some targeted things you've already put in place, but I'd love to hear, not necessarily now or come in at the next meeting, what you think we could use some of those funds for to help really target those students immediately,
So. Hang on one second. Did you want to respond, Tony?
Yeah, I actually can. I mean, if we had our 3 Title I principals actually here, I think they would be able to tell you, because they're already doing that work and they are very committed to it. And when you talk about, accelerating their learning, they had all really, I think it was in the middle of COVID or pre-COVID, gone to a whole workshop on accelerating learning. All of our elementary team did. But they are very much know exactly what they're doing. Their teams are in place. And it also goes along with the work we're doing with our special education and PCG, where with MTSS, and they're making their leaps and bounds ahead on that as well.
But just to follow up, if you do think, because I know we put in our application for ARP funding, there's a lot of money left. So if there, again, there's ideas, and if ideas cost money, we do have this pot of money. So I don't think you should be shy about it for this particular purpose. This is what it's designed for.
Absolutely. And I think as we're building the budget right now, you'll be able to see some of that as well, because, some of the items that we have funded, and I'll give an example, is a math interventionist out of ARP. Our elementaries have said they've needed those for years. Last year, we funded the first half by shifting positions out of Havemeyer back out to the buildings. This year with ARP, we were able to put the other half in. Our principals are going to overwhelmingly want those to stay. So we're going to have to look at what are some of the things that'll be in our ARP that should be long-term for us as part of our budget process. So I think you'll hear more, and we'll talk a lot about that in November.
Okay, Ms. Kowalski.
Sure, thanks. So one comment and then I think a couple of questions. So my first comment is, I realize there is, in looking at all of these graphs, you see significant slippage over the last year. And sure, one could argue it's attributable to COVID, but what I'd also like to point out is that in some of these graphs, and certainly not all, we were not on an upward trajectory with respect to how our achievement was progressing. We were flat, and we were even declining already in several of these grades. And I think that needs to be said. That hasn't been said tonight. That is obvious from these charts. And I think we need to take stock in the fact that this is not just COVID related. We were slipping in various categories across grades. That's comment one. The second thing that I'd like to point out tonight is, while we've heard all of these things with respect to where testing is and how many kids have tested where, what I haven't heard is a plan. What is the plan? What is the plan to, one, address the achievement gap that's happening on the western side of our town, and how we plan to make up the gap that we're now experiencing so that we can get back up to the levels that we're at and exceed those because we were on a flat or downward trajectory. And I'd like to know what we're going to do. Because I haven't heard a plan on how we're going to attack it. That's what I'd like to know what is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is another presentation. That was not the intent of tonight, to bring you what we're doing. I think that's what Christina was just asking. But I will say, you know, you need to go back and really look at 2019 and look at what Western had done. They had closed the gap. And that is our middle school. And that's a reflection also of what we were doing in elementary. Because you don't take a child who moves in second grade that does not speak English and have them on grade level in 2 years or 3 years. It takes a couple of years. And it takes all of these individuals that you heard talking tonight about the different content areas. They had closed the gap. If we look, and I encourage you to go back and look at that. And I think that's probably one reason Mr. Weinstein was a principal of the year. Because the work they're doing in that building is phenomenal. And I think we're doing it at all of our buildings. Certainly, I think it goes back to what Christina was just asking, maybe having a presentation on our Title I and how we're approaching Title I, how they use the data and what we're actually doing would be a great discussion.
I think that's absolutely critical. I think that we need to figure out how we're going to get these kids back to the levels that they need to be. And that's important because it's already the end of October. And then you go into November, December, and January, and now we're already thinking that it's May. And I don't think that we can have another year where we're